Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. But why? Itachi couldn't understand the man's purpose and could only ask, "What is your goal? Why are you here?" The Black Pharaoh looked at Itachi, his crimson eyes and emotionless face giving nothing away. He chose not to answer but simply sneered before walking away. "Stop. You can't just leave." Itachi called, ready to chase after him, but was interrupted by a young voice behind him. "Nisan, what's wrong?" Sasuke, his eyes swollen from crying, stepped out of the tea room, looking at his brother with confusion. Itachi glanced at Sasuke, then back at the courtyard, only to find the Black Pharaoh already gone, leaving him standing there alone. At that moment, he wrestled with a difficult decision: should he tell Sasuke the truth about tonight, or remain silent? Even if he wanted to tell him, Itachi himself didn't fully understand what had happened tonight. Too many things had gone wrong. His original plan to destroy the clan with his own hands had been derailed in so many ways. Though the end result was the same, the Uchiha clan was destroyed. But who had really done it? Was it the masked man? Or was it some unknown force? Where had this power come from, and how strong was it? He didn't know the answers to these questions. But he knew that only he could investigate the truth now. Sasuke was still too young to be burdened with these secrets. "What happened? Who were you talking to?" Sasuke persisted. After a moment of silence, Itachi finally answered his question from a minute ago. "Nothing. Nothing, Sasuke." Kagami sprinted through the dense forest, leaping from tree to tree with inhuman agility. His focus was on his target, the Black Pharaoh. As he neared the location where he suspected his target to be, he formed hand signs. A puff of smoke materialized beside him, revealing Spidey. But to his surprise, the spider remained motionless, staring at him. Kagami furrowed his brow, puzzled by its unusual behavior. "Spidey?" Before he could react, the world around him began to fracture. Trees, ground, sky, everything unraveled into threads. Reality warped until he found himself in an all-too-familiar place, at Black Naka's domain. "This is inconvenient. I must warn you against your intended course of action." Kagami sighed. "What's the harm in gathering a bit of intel? Nefrenka is no ordinary foe. He is a powerful avatar of Nyarlathotep, and you are not yet strong enough to make your presence known to the crawling chaos. I am not afraid of his avatars. With the power of the spider and the flames, I can defeat Nefrenka. Can you now?" At Black Naka's tone grew serious. "Even if you were to defeat the avatar, Nyarlathotep would sense that something is amiss. Your use of the spider and the flames would draw his attention, and the consequences could be dire, for both of us. And then, there is a great risk that you would lose yourself in the process of gaining his abilities. The memories of Nyarlathotep's avatar could consume you, transforming you into yet another avatar in his game." The young man remained silent for a moment, contemplating the spider god's words. He realized that his intentions had been too transparent, too reckless. If he wanted to succeed, he would need to be more cautious, more calculating. "I understand," Kagami said calmly. "I will heed your warning and reconsider my approach. It would be foolish to underestimate the power of the crawling chaos. Wise choice, little spider. Remember, your strength lies in your intellect and your ability to manipulate the threads of fate. Use those skills to your advantage, but always be mindful of the greater forces at play." Kagami nodded. He would need to mask his intentions better, especially in the presence of the Great Old Ones. With a respectful bow to the spider god, he allowed the thread-like world to dissolve around him, returning to the familiar forest. "Outplayed this round. But I will gain freedom. I will become my own lord. But I need more strength first. My squad is heading to the police force headquarters. My squad is heading to the Uchiha district. Move out." With the orders from Denzo and Hiruzen, numerous figures from both the Anbu and Root departed, heading toward the Uchiha clan stronghold. Although Denzo was currently the 5th Hokage of the village, he and Hiruzen still maintained separate control over Root and the Anbu, respectively. This division had been in place since the era of the first Hokage, ensuring that both organizations wouldn't fall under the control of a single person, which could lead to autocratic rule in Hidden Leaf Village. As Hokage, Denzo held command over Root, while Hiruzen, as the Hokage's advisor and Hidden Leaf Village's senior counselor, remained in charge of the Anbu. However, in special circumstances, Denzo had the authority to mobilize the Anbu, and clearly, this was one of those times. Denzo led a large number of root members to the police force headquarters, while Hiruzen took the Anbu to the Uchiha district's residential area. In the Uchiha district, Hiruzen stood with his hands behind his back in the center of the street. In front of the Anbu members on both sides of the street lay bodies waiting to be examined. Even though the Anbu were hard at work, there were still many corpses scattered along the streets, ignored. "This is horrific," one of the ninjas tasked with guarding Hiruzen remarked, while those inspecting the bodies were visibly shaken by what they saw. This. An Anbu ninja turned over one body, shocked by the sight. The victim, an Uchiha civilian, had their face scorched and blackened by intense flames, with much of their flesh melted away, revealing bare bones. While gruesome, the Anbu ninja, a trainee named Yujao, remained composed. She deduced the civilian had been burned to death, likely by a fire-style jutsu. But why would someone use such a powerful jutsu on an ordinary civilian? The civilian must have endured agonizing torture before dying, as their face still showed a frozen expression of terror. On the other side of the street, another white-haired Anbu ninja was examining another body. This civilian also wore a look of horror, their face twisted grotesquely as if they had witnessed something unspeakably terrifying. Upon closer inspection, Kakashi found blood marks on the civilian's scalp, which had been clawed at with their own hands, as evidenced by the skin and hair stuck under their fingernails. Despite this, there were no external wounds or signs of poisoning. Kakashi concluded that this person had likely died from sudden cardiac arrest, possibly out of sheer fear, as their actions suggested they had seen something so horrifying that it caused them to claw at their own head. Maybe a genjutsu? Kakashi wondered if an illusion had caused such extreme terror, but as he scanned the street, he noticed that other civilians appeared to have died similarly. Some had also been burned by fire. A combination of genjutsu and fire style? Was it the work of one person or more? As Kakashi pondered this, Hiruzen issued orders, "Stop wasting time. We must collect all the bodies before daybreak, every single one, including those inside the houses. Also, search for survivors." "Yes." The Anbu members responded, quickly spreading out into the depths of the Uchiha district. As Kakashi's team moved forward, they encountered more bodies along the streets. Their focus, however, remained on finding any survivors. They paused only briefly at each stop before continuing deeper into the area. "This is truly tragic," commented Ko, one of his team members. The ninja had joined Anbu under Denzo's orders and had even become friends with Kakashi. "Indeed," Yujao agreed. Suddenly, Kakashi stopped, noticing something. He leapt from the rooftop, followed closely by his team. He now stood before the body of an Uchiha ninja, easily recognizable due to the battle gear they wore. The expression on this ninja's face was odd, a strange mixture of happiness and terror, a combination so bizarre it defied explanation. There was a dark hole in the Uchiha ninja's head, and upon further inspection, he found that the brain had been completely removed. Yujao then realized, "I know who he is. He's Tenjin Uchiha, the one who helped me get my Anbu gear when I first started as a trainee." Kakashi also recalled Tenjin, who had been recommended to the Anbu by the deputy captain of the Hidden Leaf Village police force, Yuzuku Uchiha, but had failed his final evaluation. His death seemed odd. Kakashi noticed deep marks on Tenjin's body, indicating he had been bound tightly, yet there were no signs of resistance. This suggested either that Tenjin had been captured without a fight or had chosen not to resist at all. Kakashi was puzzled by the fact that Tenjin's brain had been removed, despite his head already being fatally wounded. As they continued their search, Kakashi's team made a grim discovery: more Uchiha ninjas, stripped of their skin, their exposed muscles rubbing against the walls as if they had been brutally peeled and then dragged. The grotesque sight sickened the Anbu, but they pressed on. Kakashi examined the bodies, noting that their clothing remained intact, despite the lack of skin. This raised a question: how had the killer managed to strip their skin while leaving their clothing untouched? The team advanced further into the district and found another set of disturbing clues: 2 piles of black flames, burning steadily despite the lack of visible fuel. Unable to identify the strange fire, Kakashi ordered his team to report it later and continue their search. Finally, they arrived at an imposing residence, adorned with the Uchiha crest. "This must be the Uchiha clan leader's home," one of the ninjas remarked. Entering the courtyard, they found signs of a battle and the charred remains of a fire. As they searched the residence, one of the Anbu called out, "I've found a survivor." Kakashi rushed over to find a young boy, eyes red from crying, kneeling in front of the corpses of Fugaku, the leader of the Uchiha clan, and his wife. "Ko, report to Sandame-sama. We've found a survivor and the body of Fugaku." Chapter 144, The night of genocide, the aftermath. In a short time, two older figures entered the courtyard, accompanied by several Anbu and root ninjas. Where are the survivors? Here. Denzo and Hiruzen entered the tea room, where they saw Sasuke still kneeling in front of his parents' bodies. He refused to leave them. The sight of Fugaku's and his wife's corpses caused even these two elders to gasp. Fugaku's arms had been severed, while Mikoto's head had been completely cut off. Could Itachi really have done something so ruthless? Though they knew who the culprit was, they were slightly shaken but chose not to speak it out loud. Denzo wanted to approach Fugaku's body, but Sasuke blocked his way. Take him away to rest, Denzo said to a root ninja. The root ninja immediately stepped forward to help Sasuke up, but the boy could barely move his legs and slowly walked out. At that moment, another root ninja entered the room, kneeling behind Denzo, and reported, Lord Hokage, the bodies of the Uchiha clan have been counted. A total of 824 members of the Uchiha clan, and 822 bodies have been accounted for. Denzo nodded at the report. Plus the one survivor here, that leaves just one person. It's Itachi. Itachi hated and despised his own clan. He murdered Shizui and took his eyes. Then, he incited conflict among his people, ultimately leading to tonight's tragedy. I hereby declare that the culprit responsible for wiping out the Uchiha clan is Itachi. From now on, Itachi is to be classified as an S-rank rogue ninja of Hidden Leaf Village. The combined forces of Root and Anbu are to track him down, dead or alive. Denzo's declaration surprised many ninjas, but no one dared to oppose him directly, as he was now the fifth Hokage. However, a childish voice suddenly rang out behind him. That's not true. Itachi isn't the culprit. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the voice. Sasuke had turned around, his legs still unsteady. Though the root ninja beside him tried to guide him away, it was like Sasuke was rooted. He glared at Denzo. Denzo returned the same look of disdain but did not engage Sasuke. After a moment of silence, he glanced at the root ninja assisting Sasuke. Didn't you hear my order earlier? Take him away. The root ninja felt Denzo's pressure and didn't dare leave Sasuke there any longer. He forcibly dragged the boy out. Despite being pulled away, he shouted, My brother isn't the culprit. Someone else did it. My brother is innocent. Sasuke's voice slowly faded as he was taken further away. Only then did Denzo clear his throat. Send all the bodies of the Uchiha clan to Root. Yes, sir. At his command, the ninjas all left the room, leaving only him and Hiruzen behind. Denzo, isn't it too hasty to give such an order? Hiruzen asked. What do you mean? I think something is off about tonight. I've examined some of the bodies, and many of their deaths are hard to explain. Their causes of death vary greatly. Shouldn't we investigate this? Before Hiruzen could finish, Denzo interrupted with a harsher tone. We agreed from the beginning that Itachi would be responsible for wiping out the Uchiha clan and take the blame. There can be no changes now. The Uchiha problem has been dealt with, and this matter is closed. No one is to investigate further, not even you. Now, I have to go and write a report to inform the daimyo. I'll be leaving first. And don't forget, I am the Hokage now, not you, Hiruzen. Denzo left, giving Hiruzen no chance to continue the conversation, almost as if avoiding the issue. Many mysteries remained about tonight's Uchiha massacre. It was impossible for Itachi to have killed over 800 Uchiha in such a short time by himself. More suspiciously, the Uchiha met their ends in various bizarre ways. Some were skinned or bore burn marks on their faces, others appeared to have died from sheer terror. A few were cut down with samurai swords, while several even had portions of their brains removed. In short, the ways the Uchiha died were bizarre, and even Hiruzen couldn't understand how it had been done. But Denzo intended to turn a blind eye to all of it and abandon any investigation. Denzo's reasoning was simple. He didn't want to admit that there had been any failure in his plan. The Uchiha massacre had been his initiative, and if there were mistakes in such a significant operation, it would damage his reputation as Hokage. Moreover, if it were discovered that someone from outside Hidden Leaf Village had interfered with the Uchiha massacre, he would not escape being impeached. A ninja village being infiltrated and subjected to a massacre without the Hokage knowing would be a failure. In short, Denzo did not want to admit to any mistakes in the Uchiha operation. He wanted to brush everything under the rug to protect his position as Hokage. He was, after all, trying to keep that position safe from Hiruzen's faction. Though Hiruzen was no longer the Hokage and couldn't become the sixth Hokage, his students were still alive. Previously, he had retired due to his age, but Denzo and Hiruzen were actually the same age. So, if his faction could point out the mistakes in the Uchiha massacre and emphasize Denzo's old age, it could threaten Denzo's position as Hokage. Thus, Denzo chose not to investigate and barred Hiruzen from investigating as well. Denzo, that stubborn old fool. Hiruzen silently cursed him. Despite their long-standing power struggle, Hiruzen believed that the interests of Hidden Leaf Village should always come first. Yet, Denzo was willing to abandon an investigation into enemies possibly infiltrating the village just to secure his position as Hokage. To Hiruzen, this was a foolish move. How could Denzo still be thinking about his own ambitions at such a critical time? At that moment, a white-haired Danbun knelt at the entrance of the tea room, reporting, "Sandame-sama, we've found something unusual. Take me there." Led by Kakashi, Hiruzen soon stood in front of two piles of black flames. The flames blocked the entire alley, forcing anyone passing through to detour to avoid being burned. "What is this?" "We found this while searching for survivors," Kakashi explained. "I tried using a water-style jutsu to extinguish them, but it didn't work." "I see," Hiruzen replied, although he didn't fully understand what these black flames were. However, they were clearly no ordinary fire styled by a standard fire-style jutsu. "Let's try sealing them," Hiruzen decided. "Do you have a blank scroll and some ink?" Kakashi nodded. Although these items weren't typical battle gear, as an Anbu captain, he often needed them for communication with the village during missions. He handed them to Hiruzen. Hiruzen spread out the scroll and began writing, his brush strokes flowing quickly. Soon, the scroll was filled with complex characters, leaving only the center blank. Sealing Jutsu, Fire Seal. After performing the necessary hand signs, blue chakra emerged from the scroll, slowly wrapping around the black flames before drawing them back into the scroll. The word seal appeared prominently on the scroll. As Hiruzen rolled up the scroll, he noticed Kakashi staring at it. "Interested in learning?" Hiruzen asked. Kakashi nodded. "If you want, I'll teach you," Hiruzen offered, the scene reminding him of when he had taught the Sannin long ago. Back then, he had offered to teach this same fire sealing technique. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya had dismissed it as useless, while Orochimaru had shown interest. Out of stubbornness, Jiraiya also ended up learning the technique alongside Orochimaru. Among the Sannin, both Jiraiya and Orochimaru had mastered the fire seal. Hiruzen had never expected this seemingly unimportant sealing jutsu to prove useful today. After pocketing the scroll, Hiruzen and Kakashi finally got a clear view of what the mysterious black flames had been burning. Two massive skeletons were on the ground, likely the remains of two giant snakes. If the snakes were stretched out, each would have been at least 10 meters long. More surprisingly, their spines were connected to large, claw-like bones. These seemed to be not claws but wings. Winged snakes in Hidden Leaf Village? Orochimaru? As Hiruzen pondered the possibility, far away in a dark location, Orochimaru sneezed. But he quickly dismissed the idea of Orochimaru's involvement. These snakes not only had wings, but their bones were made of a crystalline, transparent material, far from any ordinary snake skeleton. Take these skeletons back to the Anbu for further research. Understood. And don't inform the 5th Hokage about this. Understood. Although Denzo had ordered the investigation to stop, Hiruzen planned to continue it secretly for the sake of the village's future. The sole survivor of the Uchiha massacre was Sasuke. Based on his recent attitude toward Denzo, it seemed the boy might know something. However, Denzo's prohibition on further investigation made it difficult for Hiruzen to approach Sasuke directly. To uncover the truth, he realized he would have to wait for Sasuke to grow older and learn more. In the meantime, Sasuke needed protection. With this thought in mind, he glanced at Kakashi beside him. Meanwhile, in a small room on the second floor of the Gecko Dojo, Kagami sat on the ground with closed eyes. Thinking back on Aku Shintage confirmed for him that these avatars could only be defeated, not destroyed. When defeated, they returned to the strange items, likely mediums to summon them to this world again. Or perhaps defeated isn't quite the right word. These beings can't be killed but were dispersed, he mused. With the Uchiha massacre having just taken place, he needed to observe the changes in the world's timeline using his powers first. Since the task was complete, Kagami dismissed the night spider that was outside hunting. Before the massacre, he planned to enhance his chakra reserves, which were tied to his rank. But he could hardly increase his chakra through training. His only option was to rank up, so why should he waste free souls? Upgrading his rank also had the added benefit of gaining new abilities from higher beings. He suddenly felt a surge of power. Oh, Spidey had ranked up. At the same time, he used his multicolored vision. A sharp pain shot through his head, but he noticed it wasn't as intense as before. Perhaps the rank up had something to do with it. It was just one entity. How is this possible? It's him. Chapter 145, Land of Gods, Akatsuki's mission. After more than half a month of acclimatization, Itachi had fully familiarized himself with his surroundings and with his assigned teammate in Akatsuki, a man named Biwa Juzo. He glanced at Juzo, taking in the bandages wrapped around his head and the sharp teeth visible when he spoke. A peculiar partner, but perhaps that's fitting for an organization like this. On the night of the Uchiha clan massacre, he initially intended to say a few words to Hidden Leaf Village's higher-ups before leaving. However, since he didn't encounter the masked man, who claimed to be Madara, at their meeting spot in the village, Itachi grew concerned that something unexpected might happen and abandoned his plan, leaving Hidden Leaf Village without further delay. Later, he found the masked man at a second meeting point outside the village, and the two had a conversation. The masked man explained that he had killed so quickly that he left the meeting spot before Itachi arrived. However, Itachi knew he was lying. The masked man must have encountered some issues, which caused him to deviate from the original plan. Of course, he didn't tell the truth either. He merely said that he had faced some resistance from his father, which caused the delay. In the end, neither of them shared with the other the strange people or events they had encountered at the Uchiha compound. No matter what, you are now classified as an S-rank criminal by Hidden Leaf Village. The only path ahead of you is joining Akatsuki, said the masked man. As I've said before, the ninjas in Akatsuki are all rogue ninjas from various villages. This is the only place where you can find refuge? After a moment of thought, Itachi nodded. I'll join. In this so-called organization, the masked man publicly identified himself as Tobi, an Akatsuki apprentice. Unlike his calm demeanor when speaking with Itachi, he acted frivolously and silly in front of others, coming across as both incompetent and chatty. During the initiation ceremony, Itachi met the Akatsuki leader, a strange man named Pain. His black piercings on his nose, chin, and ears, combined with his purple eyes made of concentric rings and his expressionless face, were just as eerie as the Black Pharaoh Itachi had seen on the night of the Uchiha massacre. By the way, Pain was also aware that the masked man was actually Madara. During the ceremony, Itachi also met other members of Akatsuki, and one familiar face surprised him, Orochimaru. Judging by his conversation with his partner, it seemed they had been working together for quite some time. Hidden Leaf Village's intel is lacking, Itachi thought, filing away this information for future consideration. Aside from that, he kept an eye out for the pharaoh and the invisible samurai he had seen during the massacre, but neither was present. Pain explained Akatsuki's goal, to replace the 5 great nations and dominate the world. Itachi didn't comment on this. In the end, he officially joined Akatsuki. He received a uniform that had no spare changes, the scarlet ring, a bottle of nail polish, and a partner for carrying out missions. Hope you like black and red, kid. It's all we wear around here. Juzo handed Itachi his new cloak. After completing several missions together, the two developed a mutually agreed-upon set of tactical strategies. Let's play to our strengths, Juzo had suggested during one of their planning sessions. You've got those fancy eyes, and I've got this big sword. Itachi nodded in agreement. We should have multiple strategies to adapt to different situations. They outlined their approaches. Strategy A, fight separately, attack freely. Strategy B, Juzo would go forward with his blade to draw enemy fire, while Itachi would support from the back with Genjutsu or Shuriken. Strategy C, for this one, Itachi proposed, we could use a combination of your close-range attacks and my long-range jutsu to create a zone of control. By a rushing river, 2 figures in black cloaks with red clouds stood on a rock. So even for a mission like this, there's no need to think about who or why it was commissioned, Juzo said. Nice view, he added, gazing at the bridge before them. Shame we're here to blow it up. As soon as he finished speaking, a violent explosion rocked the area. The stone bridge in front of them was blown apart by explosive tags, revealing thick steel beams inside. That evening, sitting around a campfire, Juzo lectured Itachi as usual. Today's topic was Akatsuki's ambitions. After a lengthy speech, Juzo finally concluded, this is Akatsuki. Itachi, sitting across from him, appeared to be listening intently, though his face remained expressionless in the firelight. Pain says Akatsuki will eventually rule the world, Itachi remarked calmly. That's a long way off. First, we need to accumulate money and power, Juzo replied. Speaking of which, they're calling us. Both Juzo and Itachi received a signal from Akatsuki and closed their eyes, forming hand signs. In a pitch-black cave of unknown location, glowing translucent figures appeared around a central stone platform. Orochimaru immediately struck up a conversation with Itachi. How's it going, Itachi? Adjusting to Akatsuki yet? How about changing partners? Join me in a 2-man team. With your eyes and my expertise, we'd be unstoppable. Hearing this, Juzo was clearly displeased and retorted, we just got our teamwork down. Don't try to poach him. He liked his obedient younger partner. Itachi always listened without complaint and followed instructions without protest. Orochimaru's partner, Sasori, nodded and said gloomily, I agree with switching partners. A team needs to be in sync. For a moment, a verbal battle over resource allocation erupted within Akatsuki. But everyone fell silent when Pain spoke up. Your performance has spread Akatsuki's name in the underworld, and the missions we're receiving are becoming more important, with larger rewards. At this rate, we'll reach the next phase ahead of schedule. To give you a heads up, our next target is the tailed beasts. If you have time, start investigating their whereabouts. And then? Orochimaru asked. They will be our tool for world domination, Pain replied seriously. No one questioned him, though Orochimaru made a few cryptic remarks. Tailed beasts, huh? I think there are plenty of other ways. He was recalling the many forbidden creatures described in the Necronomicon. Summoning even one of them would make a tailed beast pale in comparison. The leader's plan is flawless. Zetsu said. The meeting moved on to present tasks. Pain assigned Itachi and Juzo to a mission in the Land of Water. Before Itachi could react, Juzo began to complain. Ugh, can't we get another mission? Not there again. Can't we go somewhere sunny for once? Don't worry. The mission isn't technically in the Land of Water but near it, Pain reassured him, knowing Juzo's reluctance to return to the village he had fled. The place used to be called the Land of Waves. It was taken over by rogue ninjas from Hidden Mist Village and renamed the Land of Gods. Your task is to assassinate one of those rogue ninjas. Also, for future plans, you'll need to acquire a sample of a special organism. That's all I'll reveal for now. The rest will be sent to you in the usual way. Dismissed. With that, the phantom images of the Akatsuki members faded one by one. As they prepared to leave, Juzo turned to Itachi. Don't overthink it, kid. We're just the muscle. Far away, in a tall tower in Hidden Rain Village, a frail red-haired man sat surrounded by a machine full of pipes. A purple-haired woman approached from the shadows and gently helped him up. She softly asked, shall we begin the plan to modify White Zetsu now, Nagato? Yes. Akatsuki's growth is on track, and with Itachi's joining, our strength is now sufficient. It's time to proceed with the plan. Conan nodded in agreement but then asked, do you think Juzo and Itachi can complete their mission? We previously sent many Hidden Mist Village Anbu under the control of the 4th Mizukage, but they all failed. Now the identity of the 4th Mizukage is even being questioned by Mai and the Hidden Mist Village elders. Nagato gazed out at the endless rain outside and replied calmly, no matter. The 4th Mizukage will eventually be discarded as a pawn. As for Juzo and Itachi, he hesitated slightly. They should succeed. The Land of Water is such an annoying place. Just being near it makes me feel sick. Aren't you originally from Kiri? Yes, and that's exactly why I'm so fed up with that place. Let's talk about the mission. With that, they stopped walking, and Juzo began explaining the mission. We have 2 tasks this time. The first one is an assassination mission from the Land of Water. We're to eliminate a rogue ninja who established the Land of Gods, Kojiro. As a former ninja from Kiri, let me explain a bit. Kojiro comes from the Hoshigaki clan in Kiri. Although he isn't part of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist, his combat abilities are said to rival any of my generation's 7 swordsmen. For some unknown reason, he was never included in their ranks. I never had any interaction with him, though. He defected from the village long before I realized the true nature of the mist, the village of the Bloody Mist. I have to admit, I kind of regret not defecting earlier. His words revealed a sense of regret for not escaping Hidden Mist Village sooner, reflecting the disillusionment many felt under the village's oppressive regime. Our second task is an internal mission from Akatsuki. We're to obtain a sample from this creature. With that, Juzo pulled out a drawing from his coat and showed it to Itachi. The sketch depicted an ugly creature, roughly resembling a cross between a fish and a frog, or perhaps a frog-like fish. It stood on 2 legs on a simple line representing the ground, with sharp vertical scales on its back. Judging from its posture, the creature seemed somewhat humanoid, but its head had unmistakable fish-like features, making it hard to categorize as a primate. When Itachi first saw the creature, he gasped in surprise, wondering how such an odd being could even exist in this world. Ugly, right? I thought so too. Juzo looked at the grotesque figure with disdain as he held the drawing in front of himself. I've lived in the Land of Water for years but I've never seen them. But the informant insists these creatures exist, and they're in the Land of Gods. Informant? Juzo put the drawing back into his coat. There was no need for Itachi to remember the creature's details too closely, its appearance was so bizarre that anyone who saw it would be unable to forget it. Yeah, the informant. She's also our contact for this mission. Any interest, Itachi? Juzo smirked mischievously, trying to tease Itachi, But the young Uchiha seemed unfazed by his comments. Oh? A woman, Itachi. As a young ninja busy with training, missions, and clan matters, you probably haven't had time for romance, right? Still a virgin, huh? Never tasted what it's like with a woman. He watched Itachi closely, expecting to embarrass him with such a bold statement. But to his surprise, the boy remained silent and expressionless, not even blushing. After a moment of awkward silence, he waved his hand dismissively. You're no fun at all. Ever heard of a joke? Forget it, let's go. Walking behind Juzo, Itachi's mind wasn't entirely without thought. When Juzo mentioned romance, a faint image of Izumi crossed his mind. Izumi? Was that love? If it was, it had been nice. After traveling all day, they finally met their contact at the designated location. As Juzo had mentioned, the informant was indeed a woman. She had striking purple hair tied back, not in a ladylike ponytail, but in a wild, broom-like style. She wore green clothes embroidered with white camellias, and her sharp eyebrows gave her a fierce look. It was obvious that she wasn't a delicate type. This seemed to intrigue Juzo, who strutted forward confidently. He glanced back at Itachi, grinning, "Don't get in my way." Itachi merely rolled his eyes in response. Maybe Juzo's the one who's never had any experience with women. The woman approached them and glanced at them before introducing herself. I'm your contact for this mission. You can call me Guren. Juzo. The guy behind me is Itachi. Trying to assert his leadership in their duo, Juzo introduced both of them, but Guren's attention skipped over his large frame and the intimidating sword on his shoulder, focusing instead on Itachi. You're Itachi? Yes. So, you're the kid who wiped out the entire Uchiha clan. Humphrey. Come with me. With a cold snort, Guren turned and walked away, leaving Juzo puzzled. He hadn't expected her to completely ignore his imposing figure and direct her attention to the much younger, less intimidating Itachi. Feeling slightly defeated, he lowered his massive sword from his shoulder, its shine dulled by his slumping mood. They followed Guren to a dilapidated house, half of which had collapsed. In a corner of the first floor, she moved aside some broken wood and a filthy carpet, revealing a hidden floor hatch that led down into a cellar. Deep within the cellar was a small private room, containing only a simple bed, a nightstand, and a chair. The faint scent in the air suggested she lived here. This place is close to a town that leads to the land of gods. At night, the creatures occasionally wander ashore, but they haven't found this spot. Creatures? Itachi asked. Yes. Guren nodded. Who has the drawing of the deep one? Juzo, momentarily confused, quickly realized what she meant and retrieved the drawing he had shown Itachi earlier. Yes, this is it. That creature is called a deep one. Chapter 146, Land of Gods, Infiltration Deep One? Yes, Orochimaru-sama refers to this creature as a deep one. Though, judging by intuition, it seems more like some sort of fishman or merfolk. Are you with Orochimaru? Juzo suddenly asked. Yes, is that a problem? That weirdo. He didn't know much about Orochimaru, but his snake-like appearance gave him the creeps. However, his comment clearly annoyed Guren. She shot a cold glare at him. I'd watch my tongue if I were you, Juzo. Orochimaru-sama isn't someone you want as an enemy. So, about those creatures, they are amphibious, and they look just like what's shown in this picture. They usually dwell deep in the ocean, though a few individuals occasionally wander ashore late at night. How often do they come ashore? Itachi inquired, his face impassive but his eyes sharp with interest. Rarely. They usually dwell deep in the ocean, though a few individuals occasionally wander ashore late at night. Their individual combat power is not very strong. Given your strength, you should be able to capture them easily. However, the one you're tasked with capturing is not an ordinary deep one but a pure blood. Pure blood? Yes, Guren nodded. The deep one species is divided into pure bloods and hybrids. Pure blood deep ones possess the most authentic lineage, and they are extremely rare. I haven't come across any in all the time I've been observing them. Juzo smirked. So we're chasing after some kind of deep one royalty? In a sense, yes. They're the key to understanding the species. Hybrids, on the other hand, have human blood in them. They make up the vast majority of the species. At this point, both Juzo and Itachi widened their eyes in disbelief. What did you just say? Did you mention human blood? Juzo asked, baring his sharp teeth. Guren, who wasn't particularly patient with him, nonetheless continued explaining due to Orochimaru's orders. Deep ones can mate with humans, and they can also assimilate humans who have prolonged contact with them. In other words, as long as humans exist, it's difficult to completely eradicate their species. Juzo was even more shocked, pointing to the picture of the deep one. Who on earth would want to do that with such an ugly creature? You'd be surprised what people are capable of, Given the right motivation, Giran said coldly. And your other mission target has more information. You're talking about Kojiro? Itachi asked. Yes. In the land of gods, which was formerly the land of waves, Kojiro has established the esoteric order of Dagon. As Dagon, he not only serves as an elder among the hybrids, commanding a large number of them, but he also uses the influence of his cult to control numerous ordinary people who follow the faith. Now, his cult doesn't just exist within the land of gods. Many island nations around the land of water also have followers. Juzo's face darkened. How did this happen right under the Mizukage's nose? Never underestimate the power of faith. And greed, Giran replied ominously. They spread their teachings through trade ships, with deep ones performing miracles to impress mortals. And for those not swayed by faith? Gold, Giran confirmed. They bribe officials with coins minted in the land of gods, legitimizing their cult. In some more remote villages, the cult has become the community's entire way of life, and everyone follows the cult's orders, regularly holding sacrificial rituals to the god they worship. Those bastards. Using people like puppets. Juzo growled. It's more complex than that, Giran countered. Many willingly follow, believing they'll gain power or immortality. Hearing this, both Juzo and Itachi were visibly stunned. How could things have changed so much while I was gone? Juzo hadn't realized that, during his absence from the land of water, such a massive cult had been growing so rapidly in the surrounding area. Meanwhile, Itachi was more intrigued by the mention of the sacrificial rituals. What kind of sacrificial rituals are these? You're getting to the core of it, Giran responded. The cult holds regular sacrificial rituals to offer living humans to their god. That god is known as Cthulhu. 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 Both Juzo and Itachi repeated the strange and twisted name, trying to memorize it. Seeing that they had processed the information, Giran continued, I've personally witnessed some of these rituals in smaller villages. They call it a sacrifice to their god, but in truth, it's just a way for them to eliminate non-believers. Those sacrificed are always people who refuse to follow the cult. Control through fear. Juzo muttered. Precisely, Giran confirmed. The sacrifices are always non-believers. It keeps the rest in line. However, the sacrifices in the land of gods are different. Since the island is almost entirely made up of cult members, they don't need to hold sacrificial rituals to purge non-believers. But once a year, the cult holds a 3-day event called mating season. Let me guess, it's exactly what it sounds like? Juzo wanted to puke. Indeed, Giran nodded. During these 3 days, the land of gods is closed off to all outsiders. The deep ones come ashore in large numbers to mate with humans. And on the first night, Dagon will personally preside over the birthing ceremony for the hybrid offspring born that night. It's said that Dagon uses the birth of new life, and the continuation of the species, to offer prayers to his god. But I don't know any more specifics. Only that this year's mating season starts tonight. Talk about cutting it close, Juzo grumbled. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Information isn't always readily available, Juzo. You should understand what this means for your mission, right? After Giran finished speaking, Juzo and Itachi fell into deep thought. Although they couldn't fully grasp the complex connections between Dagon, the cult, and the god Cthulhu, the mating season clearly presented an opportunity for their mission. Deep ones rarely come ashore, and those who do are mostly hybrids. Capturing a pure blood under normal circumstances would be nearly impossible. However, during the mating season, many deep ones would come ashore, increasing the chances of finding a pure blood. Furthermore, Kojiro would appear at the birthing ceremony, saving them the trouble of searching for him. This made it clear that tonight was their best chance to accomplish both the mission for the land of water and their mission within Akatsuki. Just then, they remembered that it had already been evening when they met Giran at the rendezvous point. Time was running out. Don't worry. The mating season starts in the middle of the night, and there's still some time before then. During this time, you can't go out, because the village ahead is controlled by the cult. Going there would only expose you. And so, the 3 of them sat in the cramped basement, waiting. Stuck in this damn hole while those freaks prepare their sick ritual. This waiting is killing me, Juzo thought. Suddenly, a rumbling sound broke the silence, and everyone looked toward his stomach. After traveling all day, I'm a bit hungry, he said as he scratched his head in embarrassment. Giran glared at him but then reluctantly pulled a box out from under the bed, taking out a black pill and handing it to Juzo. Here, this is a military ration pill. Ah, thanks a lot. He gratefully accepted the pill, but just as he was about to eat it, he stopped. It wasn't that he was worried the pill was poisoned, but rather he noticed that Giran had handed a can of food to Itachi. Hey, why does he get a can, and I only get a ration pill? Giran turned her head and glared at Juzo angrily. Because you insulted Orochimaru-sama. For someone who disrespects him, You shouldn't be complaining about getting a ration pill. You should be worried about whether or not the pill is poisoned. In the end, the soldier pill didn't contain any poison. Well, at least I'm not dead. But damn, this pill doesn't do much, Juzo thought, rubbing his still empty stomach. You'd think with all that science, they could make these things actually fill you up, he grumbled. Giran shot him a cold look again. It's meant for sustenance, not satisfaction. Here. We need to be at our best for the mission, Itachi said quietly, offering half of his canned food. Juzo looked surprised. Thanks, kid. Maybe you're not so bad after all. Giran observed Itachi's actions but didn't stop him, simply snorting and turning her head away. Sentiment. It'll get them killed one day. After waiting for a long time in the cellar, she finally announced that it was time. Get ready to move out. Juzo, who had been curled up on the ground, stood up, stretched, and prepared to walk out. Finally. I was starting to grow roots down here. But Giran immediately stopped him. Hey, are you planning to just walk out like that? She pointed at his clothes. It was obvious that the red cloud black cloak of Akatsuki was too conspicuous. Juzo looked down at himself, confused. What's wrong with how I look? Giran rolled her eyes. Oh, nothing, if you want to announce to everyone that you're from Akatsuki. She took out a box from under the bed, opened it, and handed 2 sets of robes to Juzo and Itachi. These are the uniforms of the cult members. They're robes too, so you should be able to wear them comfortably. Itachi examined the robe carefully. Interesting design. The color scheme is quite unique. The uniforms were long robes, but unlike Akatsuki's, they didn't have buttons in the front. You had to slip them on from the bottom. Since he was smaller in stature, he could easily wear the cult robe over his Akatsuki cloak without issue. However, Juzo's larger frame made it impossible to wear both robes. Even if he forced them on, parts of the Akatsuki uniform would show, making it easy to spot. Moreover, he had to hide his sword on his back, and without removing the Akatsuki cloak, the sword's handle would be too obvious. What a hassle. I have to take my clothes off, Juzo grumbled, removing his Akatsuki cloak and putting on the Dagon cult uniform. Would you prefer to be discovered and skinned alive by deep ones? Giran asked sarcastically. Maybe. After they both changed, Giran inspected them from all angles, feeling something was still missing. You look like cultists, but not devoted ones. She rummaged through the bedside drawer for a moment and found 2 golden necklaces. Then, she put the necklaces on both of them and pulled out their hoods. After examining them for a bit, she nodded in satisfaction. Now you look the part. Itachi glanced at the heavy golden necklace around his neck. It was large, with no expense spared, and had an unusual gold pendant shaped like an eye. The eye's corners crossed over each other, and the pupil wasn't carved in great detail, likely due to technical limitations. Is this common among the cultists? Itachi asked, still examining the necklace. More common than you'd think. The land of gods is rich in gold. As for the cult robes, they were black and purple with 2 thick golden lines, one vertical and one horizontal, running across the entire robe. These lines represent your rank within the cult, but actually they indicate the stage of transformation into a deep one. I've said before, deep ones can assimilate humans they come into prolonged contact with. The longer the contact, the more human traits disappear. Transformation? Juzo's eyes widened in alarm. You didn't say anything about turning into one of those things. Relax. It's just for show, Giran assured him. Though if you stayed long enough. The time varies from person to person, some take years to fully transform, while others take just 1 or 2 months. But for everyone, the transformation process is divided into 7 stages, represented by 7 gold lines. Don't worry. Your uniforms indicate the 2nd stage, so you still retain most human characteristics. You'll be fine. But when you reach the island, it's best not to take off your hoods. Your faces will definitely be unfamiliar there. What if we're asked to remove them? Then you better have a damn good excuse ready, Giran said grimly. Lastly, before you land, you'll need to learn some phrases. With that, she taught them some phrases to praise Cthulhu and Dagon, which were used as greetings among the cult members. Not knowing them would easily expose them. They're used as greetings among cultists, she explained. Great, now we need a secret handshake too? Juzo muttered. Giran ignored him. Listen carefully. Your life might depend on this. Praise the high priest of the cult, elder of the deep ones, Father Dagon. Praise our heavenly Father and Savior, the great evil god Cthulhu. In his house at Malaya dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. After hearing the phrases once, Itachi recited them back perfectly. Giran nodded approvingly but commented, not bad, but your tone is too flat. When you actually say them, add some fervor. That's more like a true cultist. After coaching him, she turned to Juzo. What about you? Juzo scratched his head and only managed to mutter 3 words. I can't do it. You. Giran was about to get angry but then shook her head. Forget it, it's your mission on that island anyway. Not my problem. And so, the group left the cellar. Before setting out, she found a wooden box hidden beneath some scrap wood in the dilapidated house. Inside the box was a gray-green skin with a strong fishy smell. This thing reeks. I wouldn't dare keep it in the cellar. I think I know what this is, Itachi said, raising a finger. Yes, it's deep one skin, Giran confirmed. I hunted a hybrid and made a disguise from its skin. The deep ones don't have great night vision but rely on their sense of smell. This can fool them. How disgusting, Juzo pinched his nose and turned away. I think I prefer the cult robes after all. Your bravery is truly inspiring, Juzo. Giran rolled her eyes at him, donned the deep one skin, and led them towards a small town ahead. Stay close and stay quiet. We're entering dangerous territory now, she warned as they set out. How far is the fairy town? Itachi asked. Not far. But every step brings us closer to the heart of the cult's influence. Before crossing the sea into the land of gods, they had to pass through a small fairy town. Though it was called a town, it was even smaller than a village. Even though it wasn't on the island, it was right on the edge of the land of gods. Most of the town's business was with the islanders, so from here on, they were under surveillance. Don't speak, don't look around. Just follow me, Giran instructed, leading them through the town while wearing the deep one skin. Great. I love being a mindless sheep, Juzo whispered sarcastically. The small town was brightly lit, with candles placed in windows and doorways, making the dim town seem like a starlit road. But despite the festive lighting, the streets were completely empty. The only people visible were the disguised Giran, Juzo, and Itachi. As they walked down the main road towards the coast, Itachi felt many eyes watching them. A slight glance revealed that the curtains in the wooden houses weren't fully drawn. Through the gaps, pairs of eyes were staring at them. The emotions behind those eyes shocked Itachi. The eyes weren't filled with fear or curiosity. They were filled with pure fanaticism. Chapter 147, Land of Gods, Mating Season Few. Stepping out of the small town, Giran immediately removed the deep one hood from her head, taking deep breaths of the fresh air around her. Even a ninja would feel uncomfortable being so close to the heavy, fishy smell of the deep one skin. Itachi took this chance to ask her about a question that had been on his mind. Those people. Giran began. Even though the land of God seems like just an island to us, to the cult, it's an absolute holy land. There, they can gaze upon Father Dagon up close. When the final judgment arrives, the inhabitants of the land of gods will travel to another world. To us, it's just an island. To them, it's paradise. And Father Dagon? They worship him there? Up close and personal. They believe when judgment comes, they'll ascend to serve their evil god. Every year, during the mating season, cultists from all over choose a few devout believers to come to the land of gods and become its new inhabitants. So they ship in fresh meat every year? Charming, Juzo interjected. This is just a way to maintain the human population on the island. The people of the land of gods assimilate with the deep ones quite quickly, so if they didn't replenish ordinary people from outside, the island would eventually only have those merfolk monsters left. The town you just passed through is an illusion to deceive outsiders. The people there are not allowed to enter the land of gods. That's why the people in the town are so envious of the cultists who can enter the land of gods. With her explanation, Itachi began to understand the workings of the cult. They use maritime travel to spread their faith, expand their influence, and bring more believers to the island. The devout are brought to the land of gods, where they mate and assimilate with the deep ones, strengthening their race. But what's the point of all this? Suddenly, he recalled something Giran had mentioned earlier. What is the final judgment? That's a prophecy passed down within the cult. It's also their ultimate doctrine. The legend says that when the stars align correctly, the ancient city Relia will rise from the sea, and Cthulhu will awaken from his slumber, bringing catastrophic doom to the world. And let me guess, only the faithful survive? Juzo laughed. Classic cult mentality. Yes, only those who serve the evil god in the land of gods will be spared from this disaster. Right now, it seems the cult is focused on growing the Deep One's race, but their ultimate goal is to summon Cthulhu, revive Cthulhu, and find Relia. In the end, it's just the usual delusions of those cultists. Giran spoke lightly, as if she didn't care much about it, but next to her, Itachi and Juzo fell silent. Juzo, standing at the front facing the sea with his back to Giran, suddenly spoke, "Since this cult is so enticing, how do we know you're not one of them? If you got brainwashed during your investigation, wouldn't we be in great danger?" Giran was taken aback by his words. She hadn't expected this seemingly careless man to be so vigilant, even suspecting her, Their contact. I'm a Kunoichi. It's impossible for me to be brainwashed like some ordinary person, she quickly retorted. Besides, I'm loyal only to Orochimaru-sama. Serving him is my sole ambition. It's thanks to him that I'm even alive today. Claiming that some cult could attract me is quite disrespectful, don't you think? There was a hint of anger in her voice. After a few seconds of silence, Juzo turned around and waved his hand. I was just joking. A joke, you know. Giran snorted and put the foul-smelling Deep One hood back on her head. She faced the two of them with the grotesque fish head. Let's keep moving. The three of them followed her to the shore, where they saw several small boats, each with a candle burning on both sides of the vessel. She explained that these boats were for other cultists coming to the land of gods, with one boat for each person. If the number of boats didn't match, the cultists would know someone had sneaked onto the island. So, she led the group along the shore to a rocky area, where they found a small boat hidden away. This was the boat she had prepared in advance. Boarding the boat, Juzo and Detachi followed suit and lit candles on both sides of the boat. Giran then paddled them away from the shore. Tonight, the moonlight was dim, occasionally obscured by thin clouds that blocked the only natural light over the sea. On the dark waters, the two candles on the small boat were the only reliable source of light. Sitting side by side on the boat, Juzo and Detachi watched as Giran rowed the boat with movements that seemed awkward yet efficient. It was clear that she was deliberately mimicking the movements of a Deep One. Gotta hand it to her, that disguise is creepily effective. Almost too effective. Juzo thought. In the dim light, Detachi's gaze fell on Giran. The flickering candlelight illuminated the Deep One disguise, allowing him to study it up close for the first time. The Deep One's abdomen was grayish-white, while its back and webbed feet were gray-green. Its skin was rough, covered in warts like those of a toad, giving it a grotesque appearance. The head had a wide, swollen forehead, with bulging eyes spaced far apart like a frog's, and a nose-shaped mouth resembling that of a fish. Giran used his slightly open mouth to see the path ahead. He was somewhat impressed by her craftsmanship. The disguise was so lifelike and didn't seem to hinder her movements much. As he silently admired her work, out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly noticed a shadow pass beneath the water on the right side of the boat. He was certain it wasn't just the flickering candlelight or the rippling water that caused this illusion. Something had indeed just swum by. And judging by the size of the shadow, whatever it wasn't small, at least as long as a person. Before he could calm his mind and think further, another shadow swam past on the same side of the boat, illuminated by the candlelight. At the same time, he felt Juzo, sitting beside him, shift uncomfortably. He had seen something in the water as well. Suddenly, bubbles burst up from beneath the water surface. The sound of the bubbles grew faster, and then abruptly stopped. A large, gray-green forehead began to emerge from the water. Below the forehead, a pair of bulging frog-like eyes slowly shifted their gaze, locking onto Detachi's face from beneath his hood. The frog-like protruding eyes allowed the creature to see the people on the boat without turning its head, just by shifting its eyes sideways. The large hood of the cultist's uniform could only cover Detachi's forehead, while those frog eyes lurked beneath the water's surface, directly beneath him, allowing the creature to observe his face completely. The boat continued to move slowly forward, and the owner of these eyes swam at the same speed, preventing Detachi from distancing himself from the creature's gaze. The two bulbous hemispheres stared fixedly at his face. Even when the waves occasionally caused a height difference between the boat and the creature, the round pupils within the eyes followed the up and down motion of the water, always fixated on him. This made Detachi even more certain that these frog-like eyes were not watching some small insect on his shoulder but were intensely focused on his face. During their time waiting for the mating season, Giran had told them that although Deep Ones might appear ugly and dim-witted, their intelligence was actually on par with humans, whether they were pure-blooded or hybrids. This meant that when a Deep One looked at you with those frog-like eyes, the gaze wasn't filled with the straightforward emotions of an animal or meaningless dullness, it carried an intelligent scrutiny. And this scrutiny, hidden behind a non-human face, made it even harder to discern what these creatures were seeing in one's face. Human micro-expressions were completely useless with these beings because they would just stare at you with a blank expression. But perhaps, deep inside, it had already noticed something unusual about them. Maybe the next moment, it would pierce the boat, drowning them in the water. Although he wasn't afraid of the boat being pierced, this unpredictability in the enemy's actions was what bothered him the most, as a strategic ninja. Itachi excelled at capturing subtle changes in his enemy's movements and formulating strategies accordingly, but when those changes became elusive, he was not sure how to plan ahead. At this moment, instinct-driven ninjas wouldn't be as tense. They would simply make a decision and take the next step. For example, Juzo, who was sitting right next to him, was already quietly reaching for his sword beneath his seat, as the silk fabric of his clothing gently shifted. It was clear that another deep one was staring at Juzo from his side of the boat. The feeling of being closely watched by these creatures, especially humanoid fish, was strange. Unlike Itachi, who was silently observing, his instinct was to eliminate the source of threat by drawing his blade. However, doing so would cause chaos on the surface of the water, which would not be conducive to their mission tonight. Just as his hand was about to touch the hilt of his sword, Itachi suddenly raised both hands, grasping the golden ornament hanging around his neck. He closed his eyes and began to murmur softly. Praise the High Priest of the Esoteric Order of Dagon. I give thanks to Father Dagon for guiding me to the land of gods. Praise the Heavenly Father and Savior, the great evil god Cthulhu. I vow to become your most faithful servant and serve you for eternity. This sudden action and voice immediately caused Juzo's movements to halt, and the deep one's eardrums on either side of their head trembled slightly as they emerged from the water. Did it work? The deep ones clearly heard this. They also fully understood the meaning of these sacred words. After hearing these heavenly-like phrases, the deep ones on either side of the boat subtly shifted the sharp scales on their backs before sinking back into the dark waters, out of sight. Seeing the water return to its calm state, Itachi silently breathed a sigh of relief. How did you think of that just now? Brilliant. Juzo whispered, not sure if those creatures could still hear them. It was nothing, just improvisation, Itachi calmly responded to his praise. I almost pulled out my sword and hacked at those monsters. Nearby, Giran, who was tying the boat's ropes, remarked, good thing you didn't. Who knows how many deep ones were still lurking under that water? You mean there were more of those creatures under the water just now? Juzo asked. Definitely more than you think. My part of the job is done, Giran said as she secured the ropes. I'll leave the boat to you too. But you might not need it for the return trip. With that, she prepared to leave. Juzo quickly asked, where are you going? I'm going elsewhere to find a boat. Once the mating season officially begins, there won't be many deep ones left on the surface. That's when I'll take a boat and leave. Good luck. After she disappeared along the coastline, the two of them moved toward the fishing village closest to the shore, hiding behind a large boulder to quietly observe the situation in the village. The mating season hadn't officially started yet, and the streets were filled with cultists dressed in purple uniforms, without exception. It seemed Giran had been right, the entire land of gods was under the control of the Kojiro, and his cult had become the sole belief system here. As they watched the brightly lit village, shadows moving inside the houses, Juzo asked, are you good at infiltration? I'm decent. Then it's all up to you. My style's a bit too direct for this kind of thing, Juzo admitted with a shrug. A glance at his sword revealed he wasn't exactly suited for stealth. His style leaned more toward brute force. Given Itachi's earlier impressive handling of the situation, it was decided that he would lead this mission, with Juzo following. Thus, the two entered the fishing village one after the other. The village was brightly lit even late at night, similar to the town outside the land of gods. Every house had numerous candles burning in front of their doors and windows. On the village streets, groups of cultists roamed, allowing them to see the expressions of the other cultists. More than half of the cultists in this village wore uniforms marked with 3 gold stripes, signifying they were in the 3rd stage of Deep One transformation. At this stage, their faces began to show slight mutations. Their eyes bulged as if pressed by their eye sockets, and their gaze became more vacant. There were also cultists with 4 gold stripes on their uniforms. Although these cultists looked similar to those in the 3rd stage, their movements were slow and shaky, like elderly women. This might have been because the transformation of their feet made it difficult for them to adapt to human footwear. As they were walking down the street, a figure suddenly blocked their path. Damn, just when I thought we were in the clear, Juzo thought, tensing up. Excuse me, may I take a moment of your time to introduce you to our great Heavenly Father and Savior? Chapter 148, Land of Gods. Arrival. Standing in front of Itachi and Juzo was another cultist. However, this one wore a uniform adorned with 4 golden lines, indicating he was at the 4th stage of transformation into a deep diver. A large hood concealed most of his face, and Itachi could only make out his chin, which was covered in stubble. You must have just arrived in the land of gods, right? I saw you walking over from the shore earlier. Don't worry, I'm not questioning your loyalty to Father Dagon and the great Cthulhu. I just want to help you understand the land of gods better, the cultist said. This is the place closest to Relia. He gestured invitingly, as if wanting to lead Itachi and Juzo somewhere. Itachi, noticing other cultists slowly turning their attention toward them, nodded in agreement to avoid drawing unwanted attention. We can't afford to draw suspicion now. Better to play along and gather information, he decided. Following the cultist, the two passed through the main road of the fishing village and onto a quieter street. Though still brightly lit, there were fewer cultists here. Walking behind, Juzo kept tugging on Itachi's robe, signaling that they should kill the cultist when they reached an isolated spot. However, Itachi ignored him, as he had his own thoughts. Giran hadn't provided detailed information about the island or the ritual of the mating season, as she had never set foot on the island herself. All her knowledge had been gathered from other cultists. He wanted to take this opportunity to learn more about the island from this cultist. The three arrived at a two-story wooden house, and the cultist entered first. A breeze from the door stirred the nearby candles, and only 2 pairs of shod feet crossed the threshold. Though the house had electric lights, for some reason it was filled with candelabras. In the flickering candlelight, the cultist removed his hood, revealing the face of a man. He had short black hair and a small axe-shaped scar on his chin, but his right eye was disturbing. His right eye seemed to have been forcibly pulled out halfway, protruding unnaturally from the socket, with a frog-like, dull pupil. The left eye remained human, making the contrast all the more disturbing. Without speaking, the man turned to a cabinet drawer to retrieve a new candle, replacing one that had gone out. When he struck a match, they caught a glimpse of his hands. The backs of his hands were a pale green with numerous white spots, giving them an overall grayish-green appearance. His fingers were thick, clumsy, and slightly deformed, with a webbing-like membrane between them. As the candles were lit, the entranceway grew brighter. They don't like it too bright, so I use candles. Please, follow me. The man led them down a dim hallway, where a trail of clear mucus was left on the floor, accompanied by a wet, slapping sound as he walked. Unlike other cultists at his level, the man moved with ease, as he wasn't wearing shoes, walking barefoot with feet that had already begun to transform. After passing through the hallway, they entered a bedroom. In each corner stood large candelabras. Their light fell on a woman tied spread eagle on the bed, gagged with a torn cloth. She had long, straight black hair and a delicate face. "My name is Gza, and this is my wife, Tsunami," the man said as he pointed to the woman on the bed. Then, in a sudden frenzy, he shouted, "Tonight, I will offer her to the servants of the Great Old Ones." This bastard's lost his mind, Juzo thought. While Gza didn't explicitly state it, based on what Giran had explained earlier, the servants of the Great Old Ones were the deep divers, monstrous beings. He planned to offer his own wife to these creatures. Itachi frowned slightly but allowed him to continue speaking. "As you can see, I'm already in the 4th stage of transformation, and it accelerates as you progress. Once I reach the 6th stage, I'll become a full deep diver and live in the ocean. But by then, I won't be able to take care of Tsunami. So, I ask that you two look after her and her child once I'm gone. Of course, I'll send plenty of gold and fish every month. Just take care of her after I leave. Here, take all this gold. It's all yours." Gza's words grew more manic as gill-like slits on his neck opened and closed. He picked up a handful of gold from the table, coins and finely crafted jewelry unique to the land of gods. Shaking the treasure in front of their face, Itachi could only smell a nauseating fishy odor and instinctively recoiled in disgust. Gza's twisted love and devotion to the cult had led him to this madness. But just as Itachi pondered this, Juzo suddenly stepped forward and kicked Gza, sending him flying into the wall. The gold scattered across the floor. "You bastard! Offering your wife to those monsters? Are you even a man?" Juzo roared, seething with anger. Even Itachi, who had known him for some time, had never seen him so furious. Gza ignored him entirely and frantically crawled on the ground to gather the fallen gold. "How dare you? Do you know what this gold represents? It's a gift from them," he raved. At that moment, Itachi stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hey," he said. Gza instinctively turned to look, only to meet Itachi's Sharingan. Gza's mind began to blur, and once again, the gold slipped from his hands, scattering across the floor. In the brief moment of eye contact, he was knocked unconscious by Itachi's Sharingan. He stepped over Gza's body and approached the bed, removing the gag from the woman named Tsunami. You are." She looked in terror at Itachi and Juzo, who had both removed their hoods, realizing that these two unfamiliar faces were clearly not from the island. "We are ninjas," Itachi admitted directly. Seeing that she didn't scream or shout, he untied the restraints on her hands and feet. Tsunami, now freed, clenched her fists tightly against her chest, curling up at the head of the bed like a frightened animal. Perhaps the thinness of her clothes also made her not want to face these two strange men directly. "Are you ninjas from the land of water? Have you come to save us?" she asked in a trembling voice. "No," Itachi answered bluntly. Tsunami didn't give up. "But you'll save me, right?" At this moment, Juzo stepped forward, his tone harsh. "Woman, we're here for our mission. We need to know some things about this island." Tsunami looked at him, nodding eagerly. "I can tell you whatever I know." Under Juzo's questioning, she explained many things about the mating season. The mating season would start at midnight, during which a large number of deep ones would emerge from the sea and come ashore in the land of gods to mate with humans. However, this mating was voluntary. Both men and women who didn't want to mate with the deep ones could go to the workshop at the mountaintop before the midnight bell rang. There, Dagon would perform a birthing ceremony for newborns, which was also a form of sacrificial ritual. Those who remained at home would be considered as willing participants in the mating ritual with the deep ones. This process would last 3 days, and until dawn on the 4th day, the entire island would belong to the deep ones. By the early hours of the 4th day, humans would resume their normal lives on the island, but a few pregnant female deep ones would stay behind to give birth before leaving. After listening to her explanation, Juzo made a disgusted expression and spat. I didn't expect that guy to have such a twisted taste. Itachi knew he was talking about Kojiro, but he didn't comment. He was already accustomed to the strange situation on this island. Having gotten the information he needed, Itachi turned to leave, but the sound of a blade cutting through the air came from behind him. When he turned back, he saw Tsunami lying in a pool of blood, struck down by Juzo's sword. What are you doing? Saving us both from a trap, Juzo replied coldly. He calmly walked over to the bed and pried open Tsunami's clenched fists. Her hands still retained most human features, but the webbing between her fingers revealed her true nature. It was no wonder she had kept her fists clenched while speaking. Her hands had already begun to transform, a sign that she was turning into a deep one. Juzo then used his sword to peel back Tsunami's thin collar, revealing a golden necklace beneath her throat. The pendant wasn't just any ordinary symbol, it was the eye symbol of the esoteric order of Dagon, identical to the one Itachi wore around his neck. He understood what Juzo was implying. Tsunami was, in fact, a devoted member of the cult. But she might have been forced. Juzo chuckled and sheathed his sword, replying, so what? Can you save her? Faced with his retort, Itachi remained silent. Hidden Leaf Village is weak, which is why you and Orochimaru can be traitors so freely, he continued. That weakness makes you naive. But don't bring that naivety into the mission. No one on this island is normal. With your fancy eyes, you should have seen that. And even if there were normal people here, they'd have nothing to do with you or me. With that, he walked past Itachi. Itachi glanced at Kazan on the ground and asked, then why did you knock out that man earlier? No reason, Juzo waved dismissively. I just didn't like him. After leaving Kaz's house, they found a vantage point near the beach, where they could observe the entire shoreline. According to Tsunami's account, the deep ones would come ashore after the island's bell rang. All they had to do now was wait for the midnight bell. The salty sea breeze blew against Itachi's face. The peaceful beach remained mostly undisturbed, with only the occasional restless wave crashing against the rocks. Hard to believe what's about to happen here, Juzo muttered, his eyes scanning the tranquil scene before them. Sometimes the most terrifying things hide behind the most beautiful facades. Above, a black cloud drifted away, revealing the previously hidden moon. The sea shimmered under its light. At that moment, a deep bell tolled from the mountaintop of the land of gods. Gong. 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 After the 3 bell chimes, the island fell silent once more. But this time, Itachi could hear the faint sound of splashing waves growing louder across the previously calm sea. The splashing sounded like fish leaping in and out of the water, or like the sea itself was boiling. Here they come. Brace yourself, kid, Juzo warned, his hand moving to his sword hilt. I've seen many things, Juzo. In the shallow waters near the beach, dark shapes emerged from the sea. At first glance, they resembled a cluster of small islands. But these islands moved, gliding swiftly toward the shore. As the water grew shallower, the true nature of the shapes became apparent. The first creature stepped onto the beach, revealing its sleek and slippery body, covered in gray-green skin except for a pale belly. A high, scaly ridge ran along its back. Though vaguely humanoid, its head was unmistakably fish-like. More followed, their forms rising from the water. They were no islands, they were the deep ones. A lot of them. The beach was soon filled with the chaotic sight of deep ones crawling out of the shallow water, leaping forward in disorganized motions. Sometimes they ran upright like humans, sometimes they hopped forward on just their hind legs like frogs, and sometimes they crawled on all fours like beasts. They made hoarse, sharp throaty sounds as they reached the shore. Chapter 149, Land of Gods. Guessed while Itachi and Juzo were speechless at the spectacular scene unfolding before them, a deep whale call could be heard across the distant seas. The 2 men immediately looked toward the source of the sound and saw a massive whale, as large as a small island, slowly emerging from the water. On its broad back was a dense gathering of deep ones. This is Kojiro's control technique, which allows him to manipulate whales in the water. Itachi responded simply, continuing to observe the beach. While a single deep one wasn't enough to cause fear, the sight of thousands of these creatures landing together on the shore was different. It was similar to encountering a cockroach. Most people aren't scared of one, but what about hundreds or thousands? Even the bravest person would feel horrified at the sight of such a mass. Moreover, the number of deep ones streaming onto the island from the beach and ocean far exceeded a mere 1,000. How many do you think there are? Juzo asked. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. More than enough to overwhelm any shinobi village. These deep ones typically lived at the bottom of the sea, scattered across vast ocean territories. But when united, they became a formidable force. According to Guren, they had remarkable vitality. Though their combat ability might be weaker than a typical ninja, they were far stronger than an ordinary human. In other words, by leveraging this mysterious oceanic race, Kojiro could launch surprise attacks on any coastal city or small nation at any time. He could raid a coastal city in a single night, then retreat the deep ones back into the sea. Even ninjas would find it nearly impossible to pursue them into the deep ocean, where the underwater environment was the deep one's domain. As he contemplated the battle potential of these deep ones, Juzo asked, "Hey, have you spotted any pure-blood deep ones?" Prompted by his reminder, Itachi activated his Sharingan and began scanning the beach for any sign of a pure blood. According to Guren, pure bloods could be distinguished by their lack of human characteristics. For instance, assimilated deep ones tended to walk upright on land, retaining some human traits like clothing or bits of seaweed covering their bodies due to residual human modesty. Pure-blood deep ones, however, understood human language but only spoke their own, unlike the assimilated ones who could still communicate in human speech, though imperfectly. Essentially, the more primitive and less human-like a deep one appeared, the more likely it was a pure-blood. There was also an easier way for Itachi, using his Sharingan, check for the presence of strange chakra. While both humans and animals possessed chakra, he discovered that the deep one's chakra signature was distinct from that of humans, more tainted, as he would describe it. Animals typically had simpler, purer chakra signatures. The stranger and more corrupted the chakra felt, the more likely the creature was to be a pure-blood deep one. Even when a person transformed into a deep one, traces of their original human chakra remained. He theorized that pure-blood deep ones, never having been human, would possess an even more corrupted chakra signature. However, he had never encountered a confirmed pure blood, so this remained speculation. This could even explain why capturing a pure-blood deep one was a task specifically assigned to Itachi and Juzo. Only the Sharingan or Byakugan could complete such a mission. Both could see chakra, though the Byakugan could do so with more precision, down to each chakra pathway, while the Sharingan only allowed for the detection of chakra flow. Itachi began scanning the beach, focusing on each deep one's chakra, but their numbers were overwhelming, making it difficult for him to distinguish the pure bloods. Initially, he thought there might only be a few hundred deep ones, allowing him to concentrate and find the target quickly. But with thousands running on the beach, and more constantly joining, even his Sharingan had trouble keeping up. As most of the deep ones had already moved past the beach into the dark forest, he finally spotted something unusual. One deep one was moving in a frog-like leap, and under the observation of the Sharingan, this one had a strange chakra flow overall. Found it. Phew, finally, Juzo sighed. Let's move. Both leapt onto a jagged stone slope. Itachi led the way, eyes fixed on the deep one, while Juzo followed closely, already forming hand seals. Remember the plan. Quick and quiet, Itachi whispered as they approached their target. Got it. I'll create the cover, you pinpoint the target. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu. Suddenly, a thick mist enveloped the beach, obscuring the vision of the deep ones, forcing them to halt in confusion. Taking advantage of the chaos, they dashed into the mist. As soon as they entered, the pungent smell of fish assaulted Itachi's senses. Though he had encountered this smell before, the stench was multiplied by the sheer number of deep ones present. Yet, he remained focused and quickly navigated through the crowd. He reached the pure-blood deep one just as Juzo arrived with a large cloth bag at the ready. Now, Itachi. Juzo called out. In the mist, he leapt high, pulling the bag over the creature's head and down to its feet in one swift motion. With a leg sweep, he knocked it to the ground, and Itachi took the opportunity to knock it out with the hilt of a kunai. Target secured. Let's move out, Itachi confirmed. The move was flawless, executed in perfect sync. But just as Juzo, with the bag slung over his shoulder, prepared to make their escape, a deep voice echoed from the mist. Wind style, supreme typhoon. Suddenly, a fierce wind swept across the beach, instantly blowing away the dense fog that had enveloped the deep ones. A dark figure leaped from among the deep ones, running toward where Itachi and Juzo stood. Let them chase shadows while we regroup, Itachi thought as he completed his jutsu. On the sandy beach, a flock of black crows had gathered densely, forming a cluster over something. A person in a purple robe threw a kunai, startling the crows into flight. Caw, caw, caw. The harsh, grating sound of the crow's cries filled the place as their wings scattered a blanket of black feathers. Beneath them, there was nothing, only the confused deep ones watching the crows fly away. In a remote corner of the beach, Juzo threw a bag containing a pure blood deep one to the ground, speaking in a tone more surprised than fearful. What's going on? Why are there hunter ninjas? The wind style? Itachi asked calmly. Yeah, the hidden mist jutsu creates a dense fog with chakra, which normal wind style can't dispel. But the wind style just now broke through the technique. That's because it's a technique only the Kiri's hunter ninjas can use. It was specifically developed to counter the hidden mist jutsu. In other words, there are hidden mist village hunter ninjas on this island. Juzo, usually carefree, now looked uneasy after realizing that hunter ninjas from hidden mist village were on the island. The hidden mist village was known for being the most ruthless and dealing with defected ninjas. So, Kiri's hunter ninjas were infamous for tracking down renegades to the ends of the earth if necessary. If they were in a land of water, it would make sense. But this was a remote island outside the land of water, where hunter ninjas shouldn't be. Their presence here could only mean that Juzo's movements had been exposed. The task he came here to complete was known only to a few, apart from those involved in the mission itself and the leader of Akatsuki, Pain. Could it be that Pain had leaked the mission to the land of water? At that moment, he wasn't most disturbed by the encounter with the hunter ninjas, but by the possibility that Akatsuki had betrayed him. Damn you, Pain, selling me out. Juzo shouted. Just as he angrily kicked a nearby rock to vent his frustration, Itachi said, calm down. His voice, usually calm and composed, was suddenly sharp, and it immediately quelled Juzo's hysteria. Think this through logically. I don't think it's Pain who betrayed you. This mission isn't just a request from the land of water, it's also an internal Akatsuki mission. If Pain wanted to sell you out to Kiri, he wouldn't need a second reason. Besides, Akatsuki went to great lengths to secure the pure blood deep ones, even enlisting Orochimaru's help. This shows how important it is to him. That's why I think this is more likely the hunter ninjas sent to hunt down Kojiro, Itachi calmly analyzed. After listening to his analysis, Juzo nodded, then asked, but if they hired us, why send the hunter ninjas too? Itachi thought for a moment, perhaps they doubt Akatsuki's strength or want to test what kind of organization we are. I see. Realizing he hadn't been betrayed, Juzo finally felt at ease. However, Itachi suspected there might be another possibility. The hunter ninjas could actually be under Kojiro's command. But that was unlikely because Denzo had once explained to him, when he joined Root, that Kiri's hunter ninja force was tightly controlled. To maintain loyalty, every hunter ninja in Hidden Mist Village was required to have close family members living in the village as a safeguard against defection. Denzo's point in telling Itachi this was to warn him against betraying Hidden Leaf Village, as Sasuke would be in danger if he did. This implied that hunter ninjas were very unlikely to defect. So, Itachi believed his initial assessment was more accurate. They hid the captured pure blood deep ones on their boat and discussed their next move. We need to see how this plays out. If the hunter ninjas fail, we take out Kojiro ourselves. I like it, Juzo said with a grin. They decided to observe the situation at the factory. Despite not having a map of the island, the factory's constantly smoking chimneys acted as a guide, and they quickly reached the building. The whole factory was filled with at least 1,000 robed cultists in purple uniforms and hoods. These cultists kept their heads bowed, and there were no guards near the entrance, allowing Itachi and Juzo to blend in easily. As they moved among the fishy-smelling cultists, Itachi noticed that the devotees were praying silently, tightly gripping the symbols that represented the Dagon cult. Their devotion was so intense that they failed to notice the intruders, making things easier for Itachi and Juzo. Reaching a spot where they could see the platform, the two stopped, mimicking the cultists by clasping their hands in prayer, while quietly observing the situation. If the hunter ninjas intended to assassinate Kojiro, they would likely strike when Kojiro appeared, now. This way, they could remain hidden among the cultists and watch the battle unfold. If the hunter ninjas failed, they would strike. That was Itachi's plan. After a long silence, a tall figure finally stepped onto the platform. The man wore a golden veil and a large eye-shaped golden crown, holding two strange golden ornaments that resembled snake heads with scorpion tails. As he took the stage, the cultists immediately began chanting. Great Father Dagon. With the utmost reverence, we offer tribute to our great god, Cthulhu. We shall bask in the light of miracles and witness the descent of immortality. The unified chanting of thousands confirmed this man's identity. He was none other than the ruler of the land of gods, Kojiro. Itachi glanced up at him somewhat surprised. Kojiro's body and expression were indistinguishable from that of a normal human. Anyone unaware of his true nature would assume he was the only normal person among the cultists. But in truth, he was the root of all evil. Citizens of the land of gods, as per tradition, I shall perform the birth ceremony for the newborns. However, this year, an unexpected guest has arrived on our island. So I have decided to offer this uninvited guest as a sacrifice to our great father and savior. As Kojiro lifted his golden ornaments high, two cultists dragged a person onto the platform. This person had purple hair in a broom-like style and wore a green outfit. Her head drooped in despair, obscuring her face. Yet Itachi and Juzo immediately recognized her. It was Guren. Chapter 150, Land of Gods, Tsukahime. Although Guren's limbs were not restrained, she had lost consciousness and was being held up by two cultists, displayed before a crowd of cult followers. Great Heavenly Father, our Savior. We, the faithful, call out your sacred name. When our voices reach their peak, the will of God will descend among us. Pays, my people. Pays, servants of God. Let the God of the seas hear our cries. Cthulhu. Led by Kojiro, the cultists below repeatedly chanted the name of their god. Cthulhu. 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 The chanting grew louder and higher until it reached its climax. He then excitedly raised the golden ornament in his hand. Great Heavenly Father, accept this offering. Kojiro stabbed the ornament into Guren's shoulder. The sharp scorpion tail pierced through her clothes and skin, and the intense pain instantly brought her back to consciousness with a scream. Ah! Hearing her painful scream, he grew even more excited, his expression becoming increasingly frenzied. He released the snake-head scorpion tail from her shoulder and joined the followers in chanting. Cthulhu. Cthulhu. At that moment, a shadow suddenly leaped onto the stage, and with two flashes of cold light, the two cultists holding Guren were knocked away. Hey, I hate men who bully women the most. On the stage stood Juzo, holding Guren by the waist with one arm and resting his giant sword on his back with the other, looking formidable. Beside him, Itachi also appeared like a ghost. Kojiro looked at the duo without the slightest surprise. So, you've finally shown yourselves, he said calmly. I've been waiting for you. As soon as he finished speaking, several figures dropped from the refinery's rafters, surrounding Itachi, Juzo, and Guren. These people also wore the purple robes of the cult, but without any gold embellishments. Judging by their agility, they were clearly shinobis. At that moment, Guren weakly raised her head, her trembling lips uttering faintly, "There are more ninjas on this island." Facing the rapidly deteriorating situation, Juzo remained expressionless and calmly asked, "Can you still move?" "Yes." Guren nodded. Though her shoulder was injured, her willpower allowed her to move. "Looks like we'll have to use Tactic C," Juzo said as he turned to Itachi. "I understand." Just as Itachi finished speaking, he suddenly leaned forward, thrusting a kunai towards Juzo. The surrounding ninjas were stunned by his sudden move, their mouths slightly agape beneath their hoods. But Juzo had already leaped into the air, swinging his sword at Kojiro, who dodged with a slight sidestep. Looking back at the spot where Juzo had been, the one that Itachi struck was merely a water clone, as was Guren. The real Guren had already leaped across the heads of the cultists, making her way towards the refinery's exit. While the surrounding ninjas were distracted by the water clones and Guren's escape, Itachi threw several kunai, hitting a few ninjas in the head, causing them to collapse instantly. "Itachi!" Juzo called out as he dodged Kojiro's kick. Itachi immediately turned and unleashed a jutsu on the enemy. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A fireball shot from his mouth, rushing towards Kojiro. Juzo disengaged just in time, allowing the fireball to strike Kojiro directly. The massive explosion of flames engulfed him, while Juzo seized the opportunity to strike down the remaining cultist ninjas with a few swift slashes of his sword. On stage, Kojiro's body was consumed by the fireball, while the other ninjas were either taken down by kunai or by his sword. "Is it over?" Juzo sighed, then looked down at the numerous cultists below. These cultists, having witnessed their father god being killed by humans, were momentarily stunned. "Let's go." Itachi paid no attention to the cultists, seeing them as nothing more than misguided souls. "Yo." As Juzo was ready to leave with him, a voice called out to them from behind. "I thought there was only one executioner's blade." "Ah, the regenerative ability, right? I once had the chance to possess that sword. But I found it too useless, so I turned it down. After all, I am the sword itself. Why would I need another?" Hearing this voice, they quickly turned around, and to their shock, they saw a figure standing up from the flames. At the same time, the ninjas who had been struck down by Juzo's sword and Itachi's kunai were slowly rising as well. One of the ninjas, with a kunai still lodged in his head, pulled it out and threw it aside, his hood falling off to reveal his bald head. Their bald heads were pulsating with veins, resembling rippling waves. The wounds from the kunai were no longer bleeding and were healing at a visible rate. Even Kojiro emerged from the flames unscathed. Though the golden veil had been burned away, His muscular body glistened, as if reborn from the fire. Seeing their father Dagon walk out of the flames unharmed, the cultists erupted into deafening cheers. To them, Kojiro was now closer than ever to becoming a human-shaped god. Watching him and the ninjas return from the dead, nearly unharmed, Itachi and Juzo grew serious. But at that moment, Kojiro waved his hand, instructing the other ninjas, "Go find that Kunoichi." The bald ninjas nodded and leaped onto the rafters, leaving only him on stage. "Hey, 2 against 1. You're quite arrogant." Juzo pointed his blade at Kojiro, while Itachi stood behind him, ready to support with ninjutsu at any moment. Kojiro chuckled and said, 2 against 1? To challenge me with the form of mere mortals, I must admit your bravery. But now, I will show you the difference between me and you. As he spoke, his body began to transform. Under the watchful eyes of Itachi and Juzo, his body was visibly swelling. The once human-shaped head twisted, transforming within a few breaths into a massive whale's head. Not only that, the skin on his arms turned a deep oceanic blue, resembling that of a marine creature. The bones within underwent some grotesque mutation, and the altered arms now resembled whale fins. These fins, however, had razor-sharp edges on both sides. Upon closer inspection, they were covered with tightly packed scales, each scale ending in a sharp, backward-facing barb. Anyone who came into contact with these arms would easily have their flesh ripped off. Kojiro's body continued to expand, growing larger and uglier until it reached a towering height of 6 meters. In this form, he had transformed into a nightmare creature. His head had morphed into a twisted whale's head, and his enormous mouth could swallow a grown adult whole. While his body still retained a somewhat human-like torso and limbs, his arms had become scaled whale fins, and his feet resembled the webbed feet of deep-sea divers. His back was covered in jagged, spine-like protrusions, resembling a series of mountain ridges. At this moment, it was as if the characteristics of humans, deep-sea creatures, whales, and other known and unknown species had all merged into his body. Now, Kojiro could no longer be called human but a true monster, a creature that had emerged from the depths of a nightmare. The sight of this creature would cause any ordinary person to lose their sanity instantly. Yet, instead of fleeing, the cultists below the platform dropped to their knees upon seeing this form of Kojiro, as though they were in the presence of a deity manifesting before them. Even the usually imposing Juzo looked like a dwarf compared to the mutated Kojiro. "This is so ugly," he said. "Ugh." Kojiro lowered his terrifying whale head, emitting a rhythmic, guttural sound before speaking in human language. "How dare you desecrate this sacred ritual? You have committed an unforgivable sin." With those words, Kojiro rushed toward Juzo, who stood in front of Itachi, razor-sharp fins spread wide. He quickly raised his sword to block. The moment the blade made contact with the scaled arm, he was sent flying against the factory wall. It shattered on impact, and a cloud of dust enveloped him, obscuring Itachi's view of what had happened. Kojiro did not just have a fearsome appearance and size, his strength was 10 times greater than that of a regular ninja, or even more. He had no intention of giving the duo a chance to breathe. He rushed at Itachi with astonishing speed, spreading his whale fins wide to encircle him, ready to deliver a fatal blow. However, Itachi reacted quickly, jumping up on the spot and stepping on the scales of Kojiro's arm, then pushing off slightly, placing one foot on the whale-like back, successfully evading the attack. Yet, as he landed, a sharp pain in his foot made him frown slightly. When he stepped on the Kojiro's back in midair, his little toe had inadvertently grazed against the sharp spines. These spines were razor-sharp on both the tips and sides, and just that brief contact had nearly sliced off half of Itachi's little toe. Turning around, Kojiro glanced down at Itachi's wounded toe. The rubber soles of Itachi's ninja boots had provided no protection, and half of the bone and flesh of his toe had been sliced open, leaving a small pool of blood on the ground. But despite the pain, he did not utter a sound, though beads of sweat continuously formed on his forehead. "This ends here." As soon as he finished speaking, Kojiro once again charged toward Itachi, his heavy steps echoing ominously. But as he sprinted, he noticed that Itachi's eyes were undergoing a rapid transformation. The black pupils had shifted to 3 tomoe, which then quickly merged into a shape resembling a shuriken. "What? You are?" "That's right, I am of the Uchiha clan. Tsukami." In an instant, the world within Kojiro's eyes underwent a dramatic transformation. The sky and earth changed colors. Under a sky filled with blood-red and black clouds, he found himself bound by chains to a massive stone pillar, while Itachi stood before him, completely unguarded. Instinctively, he tried to reach out to grab Itachi, but the chains held him tightly, rendering him immobile. With his strength, he shouldn't have been restrained by chains at all, and he quickly realized his predicament. "Ganjutsu?" Itachi approached him and calmly said, "In the world of Tsukami, everything, space, time, even physical properties, are under my control. No matter how strong your body is or how fast you are, it is all meaningless. Because this is a world I have created, and your mind has simply been pulled into it by me." As he spoke, Itachi raised his hand, and a katana slowly rose from the ground. He grasped the katana and, without hesitation, thrust it toward Kojiro's heart. "I forgot to mention, even though this is a Genjutsu, the pain your body feels is exactly the same as in the real world. So, how long can you endure this now?" Itachi slowly twisted the katana embedded in Kojiro's heart, seeking to maximize the pain he inflicted. This pain was not merely a neural signal transmitted to the brain but was projected directly onto the mental plane, making it pure, unrelenting, and impossible to diminish. Even the most strong-willed ninja would find it impossible to avoid fear or refrain from screaming in agony under such circumstances. Yet, to his surprise, not only did Kojiro not make a sound, but he didn't even let out a pained groan. He just smiled. "Is that all you've got? Drawing me into your world? Making me feel pain? A mortal's thoughts are ultimately limited. I have already given my body and soul to the great Cthulhu, far ahead of you." With that, Kojiro suddenly lifted his head. The Tsukahime world began to change. The originally black and red sky was consumed by darkness as black as ink, shimmering with a green glow. Within the illusionary space, massive green stones began to rise from the ground. These exaggeratedly large, floating stone pillars quickly piled up and combined, forming a city of massive green stones with a bizarre aesthetic. Inside this city stood an even larger, more imposing creature. Chapter 151, Land of Gods. Daigen Itachi looked at the sudden upheaval around him, and the disbelief in his eyes could no longer be suppressed by calm reasoning. How is this possible? He took a step back as his wide eyes frantically stared at the colossal stone city standing behind Kojiro. The massive stone city stretched endlessly before him. These ostentatious green stone pillars filled the Tsukahime world, constructed in a way that defied conventional spatial structures and dimensional scales, ultimately presenting this strange city. At that moment, the city seemed to be the true illusion, a place that could never exist in the real world. Within it, an even larger shadow emerged. And hidden within this shadow was an existence more indescribable, unviewable, and unimaginable than the city itself. Anyone who dared to pierce through this shadow would undoubtedly witness something even more insane and horrifying than the nightmares of the abyss. And just as Itachi's eyes narrowed at the sight of the city, Kojiro began to twist his body around the stone pillars, seemingly trying to break free from its chains. Just a moment ago, he had been completely immobilized, but now he showed signs of resistance. This change was not due to any alterations in his body but rather resulted from Itachi's shaken mental state. Once the caster's mental state wavers, the grip on the target's spirit within the Tsukahime world becomes less secure. Crack! The iron chains binding Kojiro broke apart, falling to the ground and instantly shattering into fragments. He stood back on the ground, glancing at the sword lodged in his chest before swiping his fin-like arm, sending the sword flying. The sword that fell to the ground also shattered into fragments, disappearing without a trace. Kojiro did not attack Itachi, but instead turned to attack the stone pillar that had just bound him. Facing the pillar behind him, he used his massive body and scaled, broad fin to strike and slap it. Each blow caused the pillar to tilt further. Eventually, the pillar crashed to the ground, shattering like other objects. Itachi's mental creation was destroyed, symbolizing that in the mental duel within the Tsukahime world, Kojiro had completely gained the upper hand. At that moment, Itachi still stood frozen in place. When he witnessed the emergence of the stone city, he felt certain rational parts of his mind rapidly slipping away. Though he wanted to take action, he found himself completely unable to do anything. In this world, fighting was meaningless, only the true ruler could command it and bend reality to their will. Now, Itachi could no longer restrain Kojiro. Against Kojiro's immense mental power, Itachi's spirit, while also maintaining Tsukahime, was but a flickering firefly. A firefly cannot compete with the brilliance of the full moon. Kojiro, with his powerful spirit, could construct a stone city in the Tsukahime world controlled by Itachi and influence his mind, causing him to waver. With the destruction of the stone pillar, Itachi completely lost control over this world, and Kojiro became the new ruler. However, he still ignored Itachi, who was mentally overwhelmed and kneeling on one knee, and instead turned to face the city, raising his fin-like arms high. The sleeper of Erlia. Great dreamer. Great old one. Great Cthulhu. In the name of the cult, I praise the ruler of all. In the name of the gate to Yahantlai and all who use this gate, I summon the ancient ruler to descend. In his house at Erlia dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. As Kojiro chanted, Itachi saw the colossal shadow above the stone city growing faint. Beneath the fading shadow was a distinct form. Even his perception could not discern the complete posture of this form, but he could vaguely see that it was a fat, bloated, green body oozing slime. On this body were octopus tentacles, spread out like hellish appendages that grasped souls. And more elongated than the already enormous body was a pair of wings resembling bat wings, only these wings were thousands or tens of thousands of times larger than bat wings. When the image of this alien god appeared before him, even if it was just a fragmentary form, it instilled tremendous fear within Itachi. He felt the presence of an entity that had been, was, and would always be. In that moment, he could no longer remain calm and let out a frantic howl. Ah! In the real world, Itachi slowly opened his eyes. Kneeling on one knee, he looked utterly disheveled, while Kojiro stood brightly and proudly. The time in the Tsukahime world does not correspond to the real world. Everything that just occurred was merely a fleeting moment. To an outsider's eyes, it appeared that Kojiro suddenly halted while running toward Itachi, and then Itachi simply knelt down, nothing more. In reality, the two had been engaged in a mental duel for an entire cycle. The outcome was Itachi's complete defeat. Moreover, since Kojiro had forcibly broken his Tsukahime, Itachi himself suffered a backlash. After the backlash, he painfully covered his left eye, gasping for breath, unable to stand. Side effects are so severe. This was his first use of Tsukahime, and he had never anticipated being countered by a spirit far stronger than his own. If it were merely a slight difference in mental strength, he might have still triumphed by leveraging the power of his Sharingan. But Kojiro's spirit was unimaginably strong. A human spirit could never reach such levels. If an ordinary person has a mental strength of 100, an ordinary ninja 200, and Itachi 500, then Kojiro's mental power was over 5,000. Thus, the current Kojiro was a monstrous existence, both in body and spirit. Just as he had said, he had given his body and soul to Cthulhu. What stood there now was no longer Kojiro but the true Dagon. Itachi knelt on one knee, unable to move as the mental torment he endured left his body temporarily paralyzed. He could only watch as Kojiro slowly approached him. Suddenly, a shadow darted out from behind Itachi, grabbing his weakened form and leaping onto the rafters, disappearing from the sight of Kojiro and the surrounding cultists. Kojiro turned to look, only to find that Juzo, whom he had just struck down, had vanished. It seemed he was the one who had rescued Itachi. However, Kojiro did not rush to pursue them. Instead, he reverted from his monstrous form to his human appearance under the watchful eyes of the cultists. Father Dagon has won. He has triumphed. The cultists cheered loudly below, and he merely raised his hand slightly in acknowledgement before heading backstage. In the dark backstage area, while changing his clothes, Kojiro spoke to himself, "I've injured those two and the ninjas from Kiri. I still have an important guest to meet soon. I'll leave the rest to you." Understood. A shadowy human figure disappeared instantly in the darkness. "Are there any pursuers, Itachi?" "Not for now." In the forest, Juzo carried the sword in one hand while supporting Itachi on his shoulder, with Itachi's head facing backward, keeping an eye on their rear. The two continued to flee for a while longer until Juzo suddenly fell from the branches, causing them to roll onto the ground. After a brief period of recovery, Itachi had regained some mobility. He quickly turned around to check on his teammate. Juzo lay on the ground in a disheveled state. His sword was no longer intact, a part of the blade was broken off and lodged in his abdomen. "Juzo." Itachi quickly helped him lean against a tree for comfort. "I was careless. I shouldn't have tried to block that strike with the sword," Juzo said, lifting the broken blade weakly and forcing a bitter smile. "That guy. He's not even human anymore. Get out of here, now." But, he shook his head slightly, coughing up a mouthful of blood. "I'm done for. Even if you're not a medic, you can see that, right? Just go. Don't waste any more time." "I'm sorry," Itachi said as he turned to leave. Juzo glanced down at the sword in his hand, smiling faintly. "After leaving that wretched bloody mist village, I thought you were my only companion." Suddenly, a thick mist began to swirl around the silent forest. He looked up at the mist enveloping the surroundings and smiled. "I never thought I'd end up dying at the hands of my own. What a cruel irony." As soon as Juzo finished speaking, a sharp glint flashed through the mist, and his head was severed, flying from his body. The mist dispersed, revealing a figure who approached Juzo's corpse and removed the hood to expose a face masked with bandages. It was none other than Zabuza, who years ago had been tasked by the 4th Mizukage to infiltrate the land of gods. Although he was attacked by the Deep Ones back then, he had not died. Instead, he was saved by Kojiro and had since become one of his most loyal followers. Zabuza glanced briefly at the severed head of Juzo that had rolled to the side, then turned his gaze to the sword still clutched in a lifeless hand. He walked over, pried the sword from the grip, slung it over his back, and continued the chase. Meanwhile, Itachi, now able to move freely, continued running towards the coast. He felt conflicted about leaving his teammate behind. But there was no time to dwell on it, his priority was to escape. When he reached a massive rock at the coastline, he saw Giran fleeing ahead, chased by a few ninjas. A path of pink crystalline structures stretched across the water, connecting to the opposite shore. While this prevented her from being ambushed by deep ones lurking in the water, it also provided a clear route for the pursuing ninjas. Giran was carrying a cloth bag over her shoulder, and Itachi recognized it as the pure-blood deep one they had left on the boat. This woman remained so loyal to Orochimaru that even now, she hadn't abandoned the mission. After assessing the situation, he jumped off the rock and rushed toward the shore. Damn it! They are getting closer. Giran glanced back and saw several cultist ninjas closing in, their killing intent unmasked. It was clear that if they caught up, her life would be in danger. She looked at the bag on her shoulder. Even in the face of such peril, she was reluctant to let go of it, knowing that it contained the important experimental specimen that Orochimaru required. No matter the cost, even if it meant her life, it was all for him. As Giran wrestled with her decision, a series of explosions erupted behind her, lighting up the night. Fire-style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Dozens of shuriken cloaked in flames flew towards the cultist ninjas, catching them off guard and sending them tumbling to the ground. Noticing the shift in the battle, Giran turned to see Itachi approaching through the flames. The sight brought her a moment of relief, but when he got closer, she realized he was alone. "Where's that guy?" she asked. Itachi knew who she meant and could only shake his head in resignation. Giran's head lowered, a hint of sorrow clouding her eyes. "Let's go. These guys are hard to kill," Itachi said, glancing at the cultist ninjas still burning on the ground. "Okay," Giran nodded slightly. Together, they stepped onto the crystallized surface of the sea, disappearing into the darkness of the night. Chapter 152, Land of Gods. Relia text. The cultist ninjas with their backs still ablaze slowly got up, standing in place and looking into the distance, where Giran and Itachi had already vanished. With a cracking sound, the crystalline path on the sea began to collapse, forcing them to retreat to the shore. At this moment, Zabuza suddenly appeared among the cultist ninjas. "Did they escape?" he asked. "Yes, they got away." "Then let's go back and report to Dagon." With that, Zabuza left. But just then, a few of the cultist ninjas noticed a large sword on his back. Those who were originally from Hidden Mist Village immediately recognized the weapon. "Is that? This is my trophy. Don't even think about it." "But you already have one." In the darkened hall, Kojiro sat alone on a solitary throne. What was once the throne of the daimyo of the Land of Waves now belonged completely to him. His massive body leaned against the throne, with one elbow resting on the armrest, supporting his lowered head. With his eyes closed, he appeared to be dozing off. "Come out, I know you're here. I thought you would rest a bit longer." Accompanied by a voice as rich and magnetic as the waters of the Styx, a figure slowly stepped out from the darkness. This person wore a magnificent yellow robe, with dark skin, tall and muscular like Kojiro himself, and carried a golden blue staff in one hand. He walked toward his throne with a noble and haughty demeanor. Kojiro knew well who this dark-skinned person was, the important guest of tonight, a mysterious man who called himself the Black Pharaoh. Last night, this person had suddenly appeared before him and warned him that tonight, someone would attempt to assassinate him during the mating season ceremony. Initially, he had thought it was a joke, and had considered capturing this strange person as the would-be assassin. But the Black Pharaoh had accurately described details about the Cthulhu statue, Dagon, the Deep Ones, and other secret knowledge that only those within the cult would know. Moreover, Kojiro himself couldn't gauge the power of this man. But for someone to infiltrate his palace without being noticed, he certainly wasn't an ordinary figure. In their brief encounter the previous night, he reached a conclusion: the Black Pharaoh was an unfathomable presence, not someone to be easily provoked. Thus, before the mating season ceremony began today, he sent out cultist ninjas to search the island for intruders. As expected, they captured a female ninja, using her as bait to lure out two others. After tonight's events, he felt even more convinced of the man's mysterious powers. Especially when the Black Pharaoh stepped into the slightly lit area, there were two massive distortions in the air around him. Instinctively, Kojiro knew that there was definitely something present within those distorted areas. If it were before he learned of Cthulhu's existence, he would have thought the distorted air was merely some ninjutsu trick used by the Black Pharaoh for effect. But now, he understood that there were indeed entities beyond human comprehension, unnameable beings. Those distorted masses of air were certainly not something as simple as a mere ninjutsu. Moreover, the Black Pharaoh not only knew the secrets of the cult but had also foreseen the assassination attempt tonight. It was likely he knew much more. Because of this, Kojiro harbored a slight fear toward the Black Pharaoh. Every being instinctively fears an entity more powerful than themselves, regardless of whether that entity harbors malice. Therefore, until he fully understood the Black Pharaoh's motives, He treated him with the utmost caution. That was why Kojiro regarded him as an important guest. How did tonight's ceremony go? As you said, there were indeed assassins. The Black Pharaoh did not respond directly, for it was all as he had predicted. After a brief silence, Kojiro suddenly asked, "Why did you tell me there would be an assassination?" Had it been last night, when the Black Pharaoh's information had yet to be verified, he would not have bothered to ask the reason behind it. But now that the assassination had indeed occurred, he was eager to understand the reason behind it all. Why would this stranger offer such valuable information? Consider it a small gift. A gift? Are you expecting something from me? The explanation puzzled Kojiro, as there is no such thing as a free lunch. Not exactly asking you to do anything. It's something you've always wanted to do. And that is to awaken Cthulhu from his slumber. The Black Pharaoh's word struck the deepest part of Kojiro's soul, for this was his ultimate desire. What? You know a way to revive the great Cthulhu? Even though Kojiro had been expanding the cult and proclaiming that one day, Cthulhu would descend, all his knowledge had come from 2 months of interaction with the Cthulhu statue. During that time, whenever he touched the statue, he could hear whispers, and his mind would gain fragments of knowledge. It was through this knowledge that he had built the cult, positioning himself as Father Dagon. But beyond that, he had no other means to serve Cthulhu. And now, the man before him claimed to have a way to resurrect Cthulhu. How could Kojiro not be shocked? The Black Pharaoh ignored his question and instead took out a clay tablet from his robe, handing it to Kojiro. This is the Relaya text, a manuscript that was believed to be only a legend, created years ago. It records details about the Deep Ones, the true Father Dagon, Mother Hydra, the star spawn of Cthulhu, Cthulhu's offspring, and the great Cthulhu himself, as well as the gate to the New World and Relaya. His words made it clear that Kojiro was not truly Father Dagon, giving another reason to fear this man. Consider this my second gift, a token of my sincerity. As long as you follow my instructions, when the stars are right, you will see the Great One. On the throne, Kojiro did not respond immediately. Instead, he held the clay tablet in both hands, staring at the inscriptions on it. Although he could not understand the obscure characters, the moment his fingers touched the tablet, his mind immediately grasped that this Relaya text was undeniably authentic. With a heart trembling with excitement, Kojiro slowly descended from the throne, lifting the manuscript high with both hands, and then bent his knees, kneeling on the ground. In a typical tatami room, Kagami withdrew his vision. He had been quietly observing the movements of Kojiro using the spider's vision. After the incident with Zabuza, he had taken extra precautions, strategically placing more spiders near Kojiro's usual haunts. This allowed him to keep a watchful eye on the cult leader's activities on a regular basis, ensuring he wouldn't be caught off guard if something were to happen. Since coming into contact with the Cthulhu statue, Kojiro had become infected by it and turned into a devout follower of Cthulhu. All of his actions were now aimed at the resurrection of the great Cthulhu. Due to his prolonged direct contact with the Cthulhu statue, he gained access to many secret insights about Cthulhu. Armed with this knowledge, Kojiro not only successfully established a cult but also positioned himself as Dagon in this world. Moreover, the power of the statue has eroded both his mind and body, leading to a certain degree of transformation in him. However, these transformations manifested positively in Kojiro. He has taken the resurrection of Cthulhu as his life's mission and gained both mental and physical enhancements through the power of the Cthulhu statue. One could even say that in this world, Kojiro was akin to Cthulhu's loyal steward from a parallel world, Father Dagon. He even called himself Dagon. Now that Kagami was more aware of these circumstances due to his connection with Adlagnaka, he paid more attention to everything that could be or was related to Cthulhu. So, he happened to witness Nefrenka approaching Kojiro. According to the agreement between them, the latter would act according to Nefrenka's arrangements moving forward. Nefrenka promised Kojiro the awakening of Cthulhu and the arrival of the time when the stars would align. He even gave Kojiro a strange manuscript. Although Kagami didn't see the complete text, the information he gleaned was still invaluable. The Relaya text recorded the connection between Great Cthulhu and his kin with the sea. This included contact with the Deep Ones, Mother Hydra, Father Dagon, and other information. Only Cthulhu's followers seemed to understand its meaning through prolonged touching, gaining knowledge. Similar to the Necronomicon, it required the reader to engage with and believe in its contents to gain knowledge. However, the audiences for the two differ. The Necronomicon can be easily accessed by anyone with a strong desire for knowledge, while the Relaya text can only be read by those who are devout followers of Cthulhu. In this case, even if Orochimaru were to read the Relaya text, it would be of no use, as Orochimaru is not a follower of Cthulhu, he is more enamored with Yog-Sothoth. The entire Relaya scripture consists of a single clay tablet, and if Kojiro wishes to read more text, he simply needs to touch that clay tablet. Damn, do I have to touch it to gain more information? I'll observe Kojiro more. Not only had Kojiro come into contact with Nefrenka, potentially gaining a shady ally, but he was also closer to resurrecting Cthulhu. However, the most challenging issue for Kagami wasn't Kojiro, but the new deity unlocked after advancing to the second tier. To be honest, before actually seeing this great old one, he could never have imagined it would be him, and that he would be the only one available. Name: King in Yellow. Affiliations: Avatar of the Great Old One Haster. Description: the Unspeakable One, the Lord of Interstellar Spaces, the King in Yellow, one of the entities representing wind. He is imprisoned in the Lake Holly near the city of Carcassa, close to a black star near Alderban, and is the archenemy and half-brother of Cthulhu, who symbolizes water, powers, the King in Yellow, the Yellow Sign Bearer, the Feaster from Afar, the kin of Bayaki, brothers and also enemies. However, judging the exact meanings of these 5 powers from their names alone was not very clear. Fortunately, he had more information. The King in Yellow grants membership to the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. Can manifest an avatar of the King in Yellow with power equal to the Summoner Zone. This was one of Haster's most famous avatars, and Kagami thought it was likely a power that could attract followers. Am I going to be a cult leader? Maybe I can add Hana in my cult. Why am I thinking of her now? I should visit her tomorrow. The Yellow Sign Bearer can grant the Yellow Sign. If the holder of the Yellow Sign was a member of the Brotherhood of the Yellow King, they could summon the King in Yellow for a period of time. However, after the summoning ended, the summoner had to pay a price. Parts of their soul energy would be sacrificed to the King in Yellow. If the holder was not a member of the Brotherhood of the Yellow King, they would be attacked by the Brotherhood until death. Kagami thought it was a handy power to exploit members within the Brotherhood. He could even give the Yellow Sign to someone unsuspecting, leading to the Brotherhood of the Yellow King killing them to silence them. The Feaster from Afar will take this form when accepting sacrifices from followers, gaining a significant amount of soul powers by siphoning the brains of the sacrificed or sacrificers. Kin of Bayaki can summon his kin, the Bayaki, brothers and also enemies, filled with hostility toward Cthulhu and his secret worshippers, will gain a significant amount of power when opposing them. Many of these 5 powers were centered around Haster's followers, which also indicated that the avatar of Haster had a completely different style compared to the avatar of Itlagnaka, Spidey. If Spidey mainly operated behind the scenes, then the King in Yellow was undoubtedly active in front of people. Moreover, Kagami had a vague feeling that the deities unlocked at each stage were not random but rather had an astounding coincidence. Itlagnaka? What is she planning? For instance, at the first tier, Kagami had needed to improve his combat power to cope with the crisis posed by Obito, so he had unlocked 4 elemental deities that could provide chakra of other attributes, and their powers were all related to combat strength. Now, at the second tier, with the emergence of Kojiro, he had been given a deity opposed to him, the King in Yellow, Haster. I don't like being manipulated. Damn. Seems like I should pay way more attention to Spidey. Chapter 153, The Dream That Wasn't Hello? A faint light flickered in the distance. Without thinking, she moved towards it. The buildings began to blur, melting into indistinct shapes. The light grew brighter. She turned left and the source of the light finally came into view. It was Kagami. As she got closer, she saw him being consumed by the darkness. His skin turned ashen, then black. The darkness ate away at him like a disease. Only his heart remained untouched. Kagami. What's happening to you? Hana grabbed his hand and the darkness disappeared. She thought she had saved him. But then she felt it. A presence so cold it made her bones ache. She looked up, and froze. Above them was an enormous spider. Its body was so massive that she couldn't see where it ended. Its multiple eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence. This can't be real. Spiders don't get that big. Kagami, run. Hana pulled his arm, but he remained motionless. It was then that she noticed the threads that were attached to his limbs. Please. Wake up. We need to get out of here. Why won't he move? The spider attacked her with one of its enormous legs. Hana's ninja training kicked in, and she dodged, pulling Kagami with her. But he was unresponsive to her efforts. The spider struck again, faster this time. Hana felt a sharp, burning pain as one of its legs pierced her abdomen. She looked down in shock, watching as her body began to dissolve, consumed by the same darkness that had nearly claimed Kagami. As her vision blurred, she saw his impassive and cold face, watching her disappear into the abyss. Hana woke up and frantically checked herself for injuries. Her hands shook as they touched her body. It took a while until she realized she was in her bed. No wounds. No spider. I'm safe. As Hana made her way to class, her Ninken puppies walking beside her, she couldn't help but feel the absence of Kagami. Everything looks the same, but it all feels different without him here. The classroom feels emptier somehow. HMPF. Not that I care where that idiot sits. I've always focused better without distractions anyway. Still. I'll graduate soon and maybe we can do some missions together. That would be nice. No, not nice, just practical. Having a familiar teammate is more efficient. Hey, Hana. Hana turned to see Seizu jogging to catch up with her. Ready for Daiko-sensei's tracking exercise today? As ready as I'll ever be, I guess. You okay? You've seemed a bit off lately. Hana sighed, considering how much to share. Do you ever think about Kagami? Not really. I wasn't close to him like you were. I see. Hana, Seizu, cutting it a bit close, aren't we? Daiko's stern voice interrupted their conversation. Sorry, Daiko-sensei, Seizu replied quickly. We were just discussing Kagami, Hana interjected. Sensei, do you know how he's doing? Has anyone heard from him? Daiko's expression softened slightly. I heard he is Chunin now. It's not unusual for a Chunin to be out of touch for a while. But, enough, he cut her off. Class is starting. Take your seats. The lesson proceeded, with Daiko explaining the complexity of chakra-based tracking. Normally, she would have been fascinated, this was her clan's specialty, after all. But today, she found her attention wandering. What is he doing right now? Probably training. Does he miss? What am I even thinking? I'm a kunoichi, not some civilian girl daydreaming during class. Besides, he's so annoying with that smug grin whenever he answers a question correctly. Even if he was actually pretty good at explaining things to me when ugh. Stop it, Hana. Mother would laugh if she could hear these thoughts. Me, distracted by a boy. Ridiculous. I'm going to be the strongest kunoichi in my clan. I don't have time for. The way his eyes light up when he solves a problem is just. No. Focus on Daiko-sensei's lesson. I need to focus. I'll graduate top of the class. That's what matters. Not his smile or the way he always shared his bento or whatever. What am I even thinking? Hana. Explain how your clan's techniques differ from standard tracking methods, Daiko demanded. Hana stood up, pushing her worries aside for the moment. The Inuzuka clan's techniques rely on a combination of heightened senses and a unique bond with our Ninken partners. While standard tracking methods often focus on visual hints or chakra trails, we can pick up on scents and sounds that others might miss. Daiko nodded approvingly. And how does this affect your tracking range and accuracy? Our range can be significantly larger. Scents can stay for days, even in adverse conditions. As for accuracy, we can often pinpoint a target's location within a few meters, even in complex environments. After class, Seizu caught up with Hana again. That was a great explanation, he said encouragingly. You really know your stuff. Thanks. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About Kagami, Seizu said. Don't you think it's strange that none of the teachers will give us a straight answer about him? It's always vague explanations about special training or advanced programs. You've noticed it too? Hana realized she wasn't the only one who found the situation odd. Seizu nodded. I've got an idea. My dad has some connections in the mission assignment office. Maybe we could, Seizu. Hana. Daiko's voice rang out, causing both of them to jump. Unless you're planning to sleep here, I suggest you head home. The academy's closing for the day. Seizu, she whispered, meet me at the old training ground tomorrow before class. Be careful, Hana. Something weird is definitely going on. Her conversation with Seizu had left her restless, and she hoped a walk might clear her head. Her Ninken had stayed behind, unusually lethargic after their training. Something's not right. Kagami? There, in the shadows between two buildings, Hana saw him. He walked away, stepping into the fading light. It was indeed Kagami, but something about him seemed off. His movements were strange, almost puppet-like. Kagami! Hana shouted. But he didn't seem to hear her and walked towards the forest. So, she followed silently, keeping him in sight while remaining hidden. What is he doing out here? And why am I hiding from him? Finally, Kagami stopped in front of the rocky outcropping. With a series of hand signs Hana didn't recognize, he revealed a hidden entrance. She waited until he had entered the cave before sneaking closer. As she was at the entrance, she heard two voices. One was Kagami's, but the other. She didn't know. A shame we couldn't harvest more corpses from the Uchiha when the extermination happened, Kagami said. It was a waste of resources. You're right. I'll have other opportunities. I had the strangest dream about Hana last night. I wonder how she's doing? Perhaps I should visit her. A dream about me? What's going on here? But before she could process this, she accidentally kicked a small stone. The sound echoed in the cave. Did you hear that? Hana pressed herself against the cave wall. She heard Kagami moving, coming closer to the entrance. Then, to her shock, he walked right past her. Weird, Kagami muttered. Maybe the spiders. Hana watched as his eyes changed, becoming completely dark. He looked directly at her, but showed no sign of recognition. How did he not see me? I'm right here. As Kagami went inside the cave again, she stood frozen in shock. She looked down at her hands. Her body was translucent, ghostly. She could see the cave wall through her own body. She had a bad feeling, so she fled. As she ran through the forest, she passed through trees and bushes. Then, she realized it, she had never woken up. This was all still part of her dream. The forest melted away, replaced by an infinite darkness. And above her, was the monstrous spider from the beginning of her dream. Before she could scream, the spider's leg impaled her, she felt her very essence consumed by the creature. In that final moment, Hana understood. She was never going to wake up. This was the end. As Kagami walked through the streets of Hidden Leaf Village, he heard a commotion ahead. A group had gathered outside the Inuzuka compound. Died in her sleep. So young. No signs of illness or injury. Excuse me, he said, tapping the shoulder of a nearby shinobi. What's happened? It's Hana. She passed away last night. They found her this morning. Hana? Dead? Impossible. What's going on? Denzo. No, why should he? Damn. For the first time in a long while, Kagami felt pain. It was a horrible pain, and he understood why. As he stood there, processing the news, a thought occurred to him. Hana, dying in her sleep. His dream about her. The power of beings like Cthulhu to invade dreams. If what I suspect is true, then this was no mere coincidence. Something had targeted Hana. And I have a feeling I know why. Chapter 154, The Brotherhood, The King in Yellow. Since Hana's death, Kagami felt lost, unable to predict what would happen next. Her death devastated him, but he knew he couldn't change the past. All he could do now was grow stronger. Choosing Haster would mean opposing Cthulhu directly. From the perspective of the power of brothers and also enemies, the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign and the Esoteric Order of the Cult were in an antagonistic relationship. Even with Nifrinka's guidance, successfully summoning Cthulhu would be an immense challenge. Yet if Kojiro somehow managed it, a confrontation between Cthulhu and Haster would be inevitable. If these two great old ones were to fight, Kagami wondered if the structure of this world could support a battle between two divine beings. However, he was certain that the whole world would be immersed in this grand battle. Moreover, the power of brothers are also enemies not only expressed the brotherly yet hostile relationship between Cthulhu and Haster but also carried another layer of meaning regarding brotherhood. In this world, both Cthulhu and Haster required a medium or summoner to descend. Putting that thought aside, he compared the King in Yellow to Cthulhu. After unlocking the King in Yellow's power, he realized it was far stronger than Cthulhu's, even though both were representatives of the elemental faction. Their power levels were vastly different. Eager to test this newly acquired power, he summoned Haster's incarnation without delay. As a faint yellow light flickered in the room, a tall yellow figure appeared before Kagami. This figure was so tall that its head nearly brushed the ceiling, clad in a ragged, yellow robe mixed with impurities, and wearing a pale, skin-like mask. Beneath the tattered yellow robe, an octopus tentacle occasionally peeked out, only to retreat back instantly. The appearance of such tentacles from beneath the mysterious robe, even if only briefly, was enough to startle anyone. Is this the King in Yellow? Even Kagami was shocked at the sight of the avatar before him, the towering figure of the King in Yellow. Just being in front of the towering figure of the King in Yellow, he felt a strong sense of mystery emanating from him. Especially the pale mask under the yellow hood, which made one feel an urge to reach out and remove the mask to see the face beneath. A powerful sense of mystery emanated from the being, especially from the pale mask beneath its yellow hood. Something about that mask drew the eye, creating an almost irresistible urge to reach out and remove the mask to see the face beneath. Drawn by this compulsion, his hand moved toward the mask. But just as he was about to touch the mask, he withdrew his hand. It wasn't that he feared angering the King in Yellow with his transgressive action, but he could probably guess what lay beneath the mask. Under the mask was not a human face but ugly, writhing tentacles. The tattered robe itself was an extension of the King in Yellow's body. Nevertheless, despite the King in Yellow's highly recognizable appearance, there existed an entity that closely resembled him. That was the High Priest not to be described. He was one of Nyarlathotep's avatars. He wore a yellow silk robe and a yellow mask. Beneath the mask lay not tentacles but a rotting corpse's face, crawling with maggots. The differences between the two were not too great. In front of many who had never truly seen the King in Yellow, the High Priest not to be described could easily pass for him, garnering admiration similar to that for the King in Yellow. It seemed that Nyarlathotep, the god of disguises, sometimes used the name of the King in Yellow to cause chaos in the world. This incarnation of Haster, the King in Yellow, was just one of his avatars, the other was known as the Feaster from afar. However, this incarnation only appeared when accepting sacrifices from followers, used to weigh who would have their brain matter extracted between the sacrificer and the sacrifice. Under normal circumstances, the King in Yellow remained the primary avatar of Haster. Furthermore, just like the avatar of Atlagnaka, Haster's avatar shared the same rank with Kagami, meaning the King in Yellow was also rank 2. Can you talk? Facing the humanoid avatar, he subconsciously asked this question. But the moment he finished asking, he felt a bit foolish. The King in Yellow merely resembled a human, but beneath his mask were only tentacles. How could he possibly speak? As expected, he did not receive a vocal response but rather some telepathic feedback. No. Alright, as long as you can understand me. Since the King in Yellow could understand his words, he could follow his commands. Next, it was time to find a place for this King in Yellow to showcase his abilities. His powers were mainly aimed at followers, so to allow the King in Yellow to be effective, the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign had to first be developed. Thus, choosing a place that would allow the King in Yellow to gather followers was what Kagami needed to do. Unlike the King in Yellow, Spidey's trait was to continuously weave spider webs in the real world, so it could not disappear in the real world or traverse space by itself. However, the King in Yellow had no particular need for permanent activity in the real world, he usually remained in a vanished state. Unless summoned by Kagami or a follower, the King in Yellow would not wander the real world. This also benefited Kagami, allowing the King in Yellow to remain in a vanished state most of the time without causing too much chaos while being free to go anywhere Kagami deemed suitable for developing followers. Since the goal had been to utilize the King in Yellow's powers to develop the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign, the more powerful the followers, the better, preferably ninjas. Without a doubt, the strongest ninjas were from the 5 great nations, and developing followers in these places would have been quite advantageous. However, developing followers within the 5 great nations would have easily attracted the attention of the 5 great shinobi villages, leading to the Brotherhood facing suppression before it could grow. Moreover, developing followers on a large scale within the 5 great nations could have also drawn the attention of Kojiro. The followers of the King in Yellow would be hostile to the followers of Cthulhu, and vice versa. He did not want the Brotherhood to be suppressed before it even began to develop. Therefore, the obvious places of the 5 great nations could not be chosen. In this case, his focus could only be on smaller, more remote places. However, small nations relied on large nations. Similarly, small ninja villages also relied on large shinobi villages. If Kagami allowed the King in Yellow to develop in some remote areas, it would have easily attracted the attention of small ninja villages, which would then have drawn the attention of the larger shinobi villages, resulting in the same outcome. After much consideration, he chose a particular place. This was also a ninja village, but the ninjas there had been abandoned. Their ninja way had not been recognized, their value of existence had been diminishing, and their desire for slaughter had remained unfulfilled. Thus, some of the ninjas there had chosen to leave the ninja village and had created an organization called the Jashin cult outside. These ninjas had been disconnected from the country and were far stronger than those wandering ninjas. If anyone were to develop the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign, these ninjas would undoubtedly have been the most suitable candidates. And these ninjas had been from you. You call yourselves an evil god cult, but there isn't a single true evil god within your ranks. How can that be acceptable? Then let me grant you a true evil god. With a thought, the King in Yellow in the tatami room had traversed the void and disappeared from the room. For many years, a secret rumor had circulated in Yu. Within the forest existed a religious organization known as the Jashin cult. This cult had only risen a few years ago, with no particularly profound doctrines. The only doctrine had been that one must kill those around them. Not only would murder not lead to punishment, but it would also please Jashin. However, this so-called evil god had seemed more like a meaningless title. No one, including those within the cult, had ever seen Jashin. The doctrine of pleasing him had felt more like an excuse to satisfy their inner desire for bloodshed, without generating feelings of guilt. In other words, the so-called evil god had represented the murderous desires within people's hearts. Inside a cave, a group of individuals dressed in black robes were huddled tightly together. At the center of their gathering was a stone platform, upon which lay a teenager bound with ropes. His hands and feet were secured in a large X shape at the edges of the stone, surrounded by a group of black-robed individuals. However, despite the dire situation, the youth showed no signs of fear. One of the black-robed figures stepped forward, gently placing a hand on the teenager's shoulder, saying, "Hidan, you must hold on. As long as you endure, you will be the only one to succeed. Yes, my loyalty to Jashin is beyond doubt. I can withstand this. I will meet Jashin successfully." The youth, who was Hidan, responded. At this time, Hidan was 14 years old, the youngest follower in the evil god cult, and the one most likely to succeed. Seeing his resolute gaze, the black-robed figure announced, "Let's begin." No sooner had the words left his mouth than several black-robed figures surrounding the stone platform revealed short, pitch-black spears from their sleeves. As they all simultaneously flicked their wrists, the short spears transformed into long, dark spears. The black-robed figure who had reassured Hidan was the first to raise his spear high and thrust it toward Hidan's left hand, which was bound to the stone. The sharp spear pierced through the back of his left hand and struck the stone platform with a crisp sound. But this sound was quickly drowned out by Hidan's scream. Ah! He struggled violently on the stone, but his hands and feet were bound, so he could only shake his head from side to side, trying to distract himself from the intense agony. Blood slowly trickled from his palm, painting crimson on the stone, but this was only the beginning. The black-robed figure withdrew the dark spear and stepped back, allowing more black-robed individuals to step forward. They raised their long, dark spears and thrust them toward Hidan's hands, feet, thighs, calves, belly, abdomen, and chest. Ah! This time, the pain had intensified, causing him to scream even more pitifully than before. Yet, even this pain did not cause him to faint. Because if the subject had lost consciousness during the execution of this forbidden technique, it would truly have meant death. The subject had to remain conscious, fully experiencing the torment of being pierced all over. After a second, the surrounding circle of black-robed figures withdrew, making way for the next group to lift their dark spears and stab at Hidan's body. As his throat had grown hoarse to the point where he could no longer scream, the ritual came to an end. At that moment, his body, except for his head, was essentially covered in holes from the dark spears. The blood flowing from his body had long exceeded the limits of human tolerance. The blood flowed from the holes in his body, but instead of spilling everywhere as one might expect, it pooled in the basin on the stone platform. The basin on the stone platform was triangular with a surrounding circle, and the blood nearly overflowed from the hollow. A black-robed figure pushed through the others and ran toward the stone platform. As she ran, her hood fell away, revealing her face. It was a woman, her silver hair tied back into a bun at the back of her head, her beautiful face displaying worry and anxiety. She rushed to the side of the stone platform, tossed aside the bloodied dark spear, and hurriedly began to untie the bindings around Hidan's hands, pulling him into her embrace. "You did it!" she exclaimed. "You have achieved immortality. Hidan, speak to me." The woman shook his upper body with both hands, but his face was devoid of any color, as if he had lost all hope. "Hidan." But suddenly, her cries stopped. She slowly moved Hidan's body aside and looked down at her abdomen. She saw the pitch-black spear piercing through her belly. And the hand gripping the dark spear had belonged to Hidan. He turned to face her, his eyes lifeless as he asked flatly, "The evil god you spoke of. Where is he?" Chapter 155, The Brotherhood, the New Cult. Hey. Isn't it true that if we complete this technique, we can see the evil god? So, why can't I see him? Did you lie to me? Hidan's eyes, though dull from losing their luster, did not reflect the immense physical pain he was suffering. Instead, they showed the disappointment of not seeing the revered evil god after being promised that completing this technique would allow him to do so. In order to see the evil god, he chose to be the vessel for this technique, fully aware that it was nearly impossible to survive and that he would endure great suffering. Yet, upon completion, the great evil god he had imagined did not appear. This was the primary reason for the despair and loss of hope visible in Hidan's eyes. "Hidan, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You've already gained immortality." The surrounding black-cloaked figures, members of the cult, were shocked by Hidan's actions. They had all known that the evil god was a complete fabrication, and no one expected Hidan to sincerely believe in the existence of that deity. The cult was formed by the disgraced ninjas of Yu, originally aimed at expanding their influence and reclaiming their status as ninjas. To oppose the peace efforts of the village, the cult's doctrine was centered around killing, in direct contrast to peace. These ninjas rejected the peace of Yu, opting instead to create chaos in hopes of regaining attention and respect from the land of hot water. However, while they spoke of slaughter, the cult did not actually engage in indiscriminate killing within the country. Their methods were merely cruel during missions. If the cult had truly committed random acts of mass murder, the land of hot water would have long since hired other ninjas to eliminate them. As for the evil god, it was like a mantra, or a psychological suggestion. Everyone claimed its existence, yet deep down, they all knew it didn't exist. To further gain influence, it was only natural to seek stronger power. Thus, these cultists, former ninjas of Yu, chose to develop forbidden techniques that could grant the practitioner immortality. Previous test subjects had all died before reaching the end, leaving Hidan as the only one to successfully endure without losing consciousness. As a result, Was Hidan the only one in the cult who truly believed in the existence of the evil god? A pure madman? Several black-cloaked individuals pulled aside a woman who had been stabbed in the abdomen, then two of them each grabbed one of Hidan's arms, preventing him from moving. What should we do with him? This kid has completely lost it, he's useless now. Let's kill him. But he's immortal now. How do we kill an immortal? He's the only successful case of this technique so far, so he's very important to us. Let's keep him alive for now. The members of the cult disagreed on how to handle Hidan. Some believed he had gone completely mad and was therefore worthless, while others thought of him as a successful case of the forbidden technique, valuable for research. My lord. As the cult members debated, Hidan, with his head bowed, called out. The black-cloaked figures turned to listen, curious about what he had to say. The evil god exists. He will punish you. Hidan yelled at them. They were momentarily stunned, then one person burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, you're the only fool in the entire cult who believes that. He's not a fool, he's a complete madman. Evil god? How could anything like that exist in this world? Do you know anyone who has ever seen the evil god? Just made up nonsense, and yet some people actually believe it. Children are just children, they're easily fooled by such things. The cult members laughed at him. The laughter continued for a while until a higher-ranking member of the cult ordered that Hidan be properly locked up for later use in research on the forbidden technique. After all, there was only this one successful living specimen, and it couldn't be wasted. Just as several black-cloaked individuals were escorting Hidan deeper into the cave, a shouting voice from outside caught their attention. Who goes there? Ah! Ah! The anguished screams from outside drew the attention of the cult members in the cave. The higher-ranking one immediately pointed at the cave entrance and ordered, "Go check what's happening." Several black-cloaked figures rushed out with pitch-black spears still stained with Hidan's blood, while those remaining in the cave held their breath, trying to assess the situation outside by sound. However, they did not hear any distinct sounds of battle, only more screams from outside. Ah! Puchy! Bang! Bang! Various sounds from outside the cave flooded in, triggering a wave of ominous thoughts among the black-cloaked figures. Could it be that the Land of Hot Water has hired ninjas from other villages to exterminate us? No, that can't be. How can it not be? We're renegade ninjas. What should we do? Let's go out and fight them. Tension and fear spread among them as they discussed how to respond to the impending danger. At that moment, a discordant voice rang out behind them. It's my lord. It's the evil god coming to punish you. Ha ha ha. You deserve this. Hidan's mad laughter and raving immediately provoked disgust among the others, and a nearby black-cloaked member quickly gagged him, silencing him. What should we do, chief? At this point, we can only go out and take a look. Led by the leader of the cult, the black-cloaked figures approached the cave entrance. But the moment they stood at the entrance, everyone was utterly dumbfounded. In the cult's forest camp, many cult followers were prostrate on the ground. Some members were frantically bowing to the ground, those earlier bangs had been from their heads colliding with the earth. Their foreheads were already bloodied, and some even had their heads smashed against the rocks, exposing their white skulls as they lay limply to the side. They had actually knocked themselves to death. Others picked up their dark spears and stabbed them into their own abdomens. Even as they pierced through, they seemed unsatisfied and drove the spears in further until they finally died. Some cult members directly gouged out their own eyeballs, kneeling before a figure, presenting their eyes with both hands. At the center of this chaos was a yellow figure. It stood twice as tall as an ordinary person, requiring an adult to look up to see its face. It wore a tattered, mesmerizing yellow robe that flowed to the ground, with a silken strand dangling from the pointed hood. Its face was covered with a pale, skin-like mask, hiding what seemed to be the gaze of an endless abyss. Sometimes it appeared to have wings, other times, it bore a halo above its head. Around its neck, like many cult members, it wore a necklace. However, while the cult members wore silver necklaces adorned with a triangular pendant wrapped in a circle, it donned a golden necklace with a golden disc hanging below. On the golden disc was a three-clawed tentacle mark made of simple dots and lines. When the cult members' gazes fell upon this yellow mark, they were astonished to see the tentacles on the mark writhing, flickering, and rotating. As the rotation gradually enlarged, the cult members' brains received unfettered information. This information consumed what little reason remained in their minds, isolating it completely. At that moment, their thoughts could only entertain one idea, and they were permitted to accept only this one idea. The figure before them was an ultimate evil god. And its name was Haster. Ah! Ah! Screams echoed from the cave entrance deep into the cavern, shaking the two black-robed guards watching over Hidan. What's happening outside? I don't know. Maybe everyone out there is already dead. Hey! You're such a jinx. As the two black-robed men spoke, Hidan seized the opportunity, crashing into the two guards and bolting toward the cave entrance. Hey! This kid! The black-robed men chased after him, closing the distance fast. They reached the cave entrance together, but just as Hidan was about to escape, his pursuers lunged forward, pinning him to the ground. I won't let you run again. One of the black-robed men pulled out a rope, preparing to tie up Hidan's feet, while the other inadvertently looked up and saw outside the cave. His gaze froze, transfixed by something outside. What's wrong with you? The second black-robed man followed his companion's stare and saw an unbelievable scene. All the black-robed people in the camp were prostrating around a figure clad in tattered yellow robes. As the two black-robed men witnessed this ragged entity, it too noticed these two disrespectful individuals who dared to stand before the king in yellow. Suddenly, two enormous, thick, dark red tentacles extended from beneath the yellow robe, reaching out to the two black-robed men, wrapping their bodies and pulling them closer. Ah! Don't! The black-robed men were dragged right in front of the king in yellow, their heads forcibly turned to face his masked visage. Their feet struggled frantically, and in their eyes, a boundless figure in the vast starry sky was rapidly enlarging. At the moment this figure waved its yellow robe, it instantly swept away all rational thought from the black-robed men's minds. Ah! Blood poured from the black-robed man's eyes and the corners of his mouth, his head drooping helplessly to one side. When the avatar appeared in the form of the king in yellow, he did not kill his followers or kidnap like most other evil gods. If not necessary, he would even refrain from actively attacking his followers. But this premise applied only to his followers, not to those who dared to stand upright in his presence. The bodies of the two black-robed men were casually tossed aside by the king in yellow's tentacles, and the tentacles on the ground slowly moved forward with a mysterious elegance toward Hidan. Using the word walk to describe his movement might not be fitting, his movement resembled a floating glide. In any case, the king in yellow arrived before Hidan, the tentacles lightly brushing against the ropes binding him, causing them to fall away on their own. At this moment, Hidan's gaze was incredibly reverent, tears of excitement streaming down his face, his trembling lips expressing the intense emotions within him. Great evil god! I finally see you! As the king in yellow personally freed him, Hidan immediately knelt before the evil god, just like the surrounding black-robed men. The moment Hidan laid eyes on him, all information regarding the king in yellow flooded into his mind. Lord Haster, the Great Old One, the king in yellow, the feaster from afar, lord of interstellar spaces, Cthulhu's brother and nemesis. Hidan's mind became intoxicated with this information, even though it further clouded his already irrational brain. But he didn't care, all he sought was to gaze upon this unparalleled mystery before him. Suddenly, he shouted fervently. This is the ultimate evil god I believe in. The king in yellow. I am willing to be your follower. I am willing to offer you my most devout prayers. I am willing to present you with the most sumptuous offerings. The last line was not spoken by Hidan, but by the remaining black-robed men. These black-robed men smartly chose to kneel the moment they saw the king in yellow, thus avoiding a tragic fate. However, by choosing to kneel, they also became his loyal followers. This was not an obedience chosen for survival, but a complete transformation in mindset. Just like those ninjas who saw the Cthulhu statues bearing his projection, they would actively become loyal followers of Cthulhu. In the fervent gaze of the pilgrims, the king in yellow slightly raised his arm, extending the tentacles hidden beneath his tattered robe. Beneath that long sleeve was a gray three-pronged tentacle. Between its prongs sat a golden disc bearing a sigil of three twisted tentacles. When this yellow sigil was held by the king in yellow's tentacle, the three tentacles above it began to spin wildly, resembling rolling wheels. This was the yellow sign. A blessing from the chosen. An incredibly exalted symbol. Hidan immediately raised his hands to receive the yellow sign. The heavy weight struck him the moment he grasped it, and his mind was filled with astonishing illusions. On that long robe of the sleeper, a mist resembling an abyss swirled. A blood moon loomed in the night sky, while a dazzling black star rose. Beneath the blood moon's light lay a ruined ancient city. The lost Carcassa. That tattered clothing, long forgotten. At the center of tranquil Lake Holly, a figure was slowly rising. In the fleeting images, more complex emotions surged within Hidan. His heart was filled with shock, fervor, obsession, longing, and fear. These merged emotions rendered the human experience of facial expression utterly inadequate. He could only express his faith and loyalty to the king in yellow through continuous prostration, articulating his minuscule feelings. Even the surviving black-robed men also knelt in worship without pause. Although they had not received the honor of the yellow sign, being personally bestowed the sign by the king in yellow meant that Hidan was now the closest to the Great Old One among them. So at this moment, they were not only worshipping the king in yellow, but also worshipping Hidan. When Hidan and the remaining black-robed men regained their senses, everything had already ended. The king in yellow's figure had vanished, But the yellow sign in Hidan's hand constantly reminded everyone that the appearance of that mysterious entity was no illusion. He raised the yellow sign in his hand, noticing that the 3 tentacles on it had returned to calm. The sign only exhibited rapid spinning, flashing, and other phenomena when close to the king in yellow or Haster's kin, otherwise, it remained dormant. But even now, holding the yellow sign, he could vaguely hear whispers from the king in yellow. For what Hidan held was not a mere emblem, but a communication device with the evil god. These whispers would provide him with some guidance. He lifted the yellow sign, and the black-robed men, who were about to rise, immediately knelt again upon seeing it. The Jashin cult is a thing of the past. We are now the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign. Isn't that right? Brother? Chapter 156, The Nameless City. The talk in Kagami's mind, dozens of names suddenly appeared. These had all been members Jashin cult, who had seen the presence of the king in yellow and had successfully offered their loyalty. Of course, some of them had been killed by the Avatar because they had not knelt immediately upon seeing him. Or, their pitiful sanity had not been able to withstand the presence of the king in yellow, leading them to lose all rationality and die instantly. As a result, the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign consisted of only over 20 members, which was pitifully small compared to the esoteric order of cult that worshipped Cthulhu. The followers of the cult, combined with the Deep Ones, could easily have drowned these 20 or so people with a single spit. Fortunately, the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign was made up of relatively elite members. Many ninjas from Mu had originally been part of the Jashin cult, and those who had survived under the sanity checks of the king in yellow were all capable ninjas. In this world, a person's sanity could usually be measured by the amount of chakra they possessed. The stronger the chakra, the stronger the mind, which meant greater resistance to indescribable entities. However, this was not absolute. For instance, someone like Guy, who was considered a fool, or Hidan, who was regarded as a madman. Handing the yellow sign to Hidan and making him the leader of the Brotherhood of the Yellow Sign was also Kagami's intention. The reason was not particularly special, at least Hidan possessed immortality. As a follower of the king in yellow, not dying was the best attribute. Itachi was walking alone. Suddenly, a vague mocking laughter echoed in the phantom darkness ahead. Itachi looked up but did not see the source of the laughter. However, the mocking sound continued to resonate in his ears. Gigagigi. The laughter was sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, and with each chuckle, Itachi's inner anger grew. Then, all of a sudden, a massive ancient stone city appeared before him. This city, made of green stone pillars, emitted an unclean aura, and just standing outside the city and looking at its appearance made him feel a chill, as if he were submerged in the cold depths of the sea. Suddenly, Itachi felt something wrapping around his waist, and his entire body was lifted into the air. Looking up, he realized he was being grabbed by a huge shadow lurking above the city. In the shadow's hand, Itachi's body was smaller than the skewer for a dango. Just a little pressure from the thumb could easily snap his body. He was firmly held in the shadow's grip, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. At that moment, he heard the laughter again. Turning to look, he finally saw the person making the mocking sound. It was a black man dressed in a flamboyant robe. His face could not be seen in the darkness, but Itachi could clearly see his bright white teeth revealed by his smile. He stood beside Itachi, watching him being grasped by the giant shadow, continuously laughing as if mocking Itachi's predicament. This only made Itachi angrier. Just as he raised his hand to strike the man close at hand, his body drifted away again. This time, the shadow from the stone city directly grabbed his body and brought him face to face with a giant, tentacled face. As the distance closed, the shadow in Itachi's vision diminished. What he could only see as a dark chin transformed into a clear image. A huge, ugly green octopus head stared right at him. Itachi jolted awake, his chest heaving, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The same dream had haunted him every night since he had narrowly escaped death in the land of gods. Walking alone in the darkness, he had first been captured by the shadow above the giant stone city, and then the black man had laughed at him nearby. Each time his body had been drawn closer to that enormous face, the dream had abruptly ended. Itachi knew exactly what he was seeing in his dream. The stone city should have been the deep-sea city Relia mentioned in the cult's doctrine, and hovering above it had been the deity they worshipped, Cthulhu. The man who had continuously mocked him was the Black Pharaoh he had encountered on the night of his clan's extermination. But what puzzled him was why these two seemingly unrelated figures appeared together in his dreams. Since the night of the extermination, Itachi had not dreamed of the Black Pharaoh. Yet ever since he had seen Cthulhu and Relia, these two elements had appeared together in his dreams. Could there have been a connection between the two? He could not figure out a relationship between them. He could only get out of bed and prepare to wash his face at the sink. Bright sunlight poured into the room from outside. Although it was daytime, Itachi still chose to sleep. Recently, This dream had significantly affected the quality of his sleep, so he could only catch up on sleep during the day to feel better. Cold water splashed on his face, waking Itachi's mind a bit. He grabbed a towel from the nearby shelf and wiped his face a few times. When he pulled it away, the mirror revealed tentacles growing from his chin. What? In his terror, Itachi threw the towel onto the mirror and collapsed to the ground. Was that me just now? Why had my face changed to that? Regulating his breathing, he stood up again and slowly looked into the mirror. Although he had faint dark circles under his eyes and his complexion wasn't good, he still had distinct ear troughs and a cold expression along with a well-defined jawline. It was still his face. He touched his chin with his hand, confirming through touch that there were no foreign objects on it, which finally reassured him. Maybe my mental state isn't so good. At that moment, a voice reached his ears. Itachi. You currently have no partner. According to the rules of Akatsuki, you will be reassigned missions after finding a partner. So during this time, you will monitor Orochimaru's laboratory and the progress of his experiments. That is all. I understand, Itachi replied to Pain. In a bright spot of a giant cave, Orochimaru stood in front of an operating table, rapidly switching between various surgical instruments in his hands. Suddenly, his movements came to a halt. He turned to look into the darkness in the distance and said, "Come out." From the darkness, a slightly shorter figure stepped out from behind a rock. Upon seeing this person's face, a wicked smile immediately appeared on Orochimaru's face. Itachi. You're here. Itachi slowly walked from the dark area into the light, exposing his body to the illumination. Orochimaru maintained his smile as he looked up and down at Itachi's body, but when he noticed Itachi's dark circles under his eyes, the smile on Orochimaru's face faded slightly, as if he were a parent seeing their child staying up late. Itachi, you don't look so good. Itachi didn't answer but turned his gaze to the operating table. What lay on the table was not a human body but a corpse of a deep one. He recognized that this was the pure blood deep one he had captured in the land of gods. The horrifying body had already been eviscerated under Orochimaru's scalpel. Itachi had no interest in examining the structure inside, so he turned his head and said, "The leader sent me here to help. You're here to monitor me, aren't you?" Itachi didn't answer, which was equivalent to an admission. Orochimaru smiled slightly, not caring, and turned back to continue the dissection. Standing behind Orochimaru and watching him, Itachi suddenly thought of the mission in the land of gods. Giran had mentioned that part of the intelligence was something she had gathered over the years, and another part was provided by Orochimaru. If that's the case, does Orochimaru know about the things that keep appearing in his dreams? Orochimaru. What is Cthulhu? Orochimaru's scalpel stopped at Itachi's question. Your interest in this is rather unexpected, he said. You really have impressed me. Itachi didn't bother with pleasantries and directly asked, do you know, or not? Orochimaru turned to look at Itachi and said nonchalantly, I know a little. What part do you want to know? All of it. Greedy, aren't you? Orochimaru put down his scalpel, indicating that this would be a longer discussion. Cthulhu is the god worshipped by the cult in the Land of Waves, now known as the Land of God. The Deep Ones are among his other worshippers. You should know this much, right? Itachi nodded. But actually, Cthulhu is not just the god of the cult. He is also one of the Great Old Ones, a being that stands alongside many other evil gods. Wait a minute. Itachi immediately interrupted Orochimaru and asked, are you saying there are many evil gods like Cthulhu? Orochimaru nodded and said in a serious yet slightly playful tone, among the many evil gods, I think he's just a rather mediocre one. In the face of certain beings, he is insignificant. At this point, Itachi's face remained somewhat cold, but his heart was already stirred. Great Old Ones? Cthulhu is just one of them. And he's just mediocre? All of this was difficult for him to imagine because, judging by the number of people who worshipped Cthulhu, if the so-called Great Old Ones had many followers, he would have never heard of this strange term. Noticing Itachi's inner confusion, Orochimaru began to explain. The Great Old Ones, simply put, are the rulers from other worlds. They are composed of substances far beyond ordinary existence, hence their structure is not influenced by the laws of physics. What we can observe or imagine is merely their material shell, their essence has surpassed ordinary spatial limitations and cannot be easily measured. These Great Old Ones began to move across various places in the universe long before humanity was born. Their existence transcends time and space far beyond our present moment, so it's normal that we don't perceive their existence in our history. Upon reflection, the era of ninjas is only about 1,000 years. How many people from 1,000 years ago could know about them? Orochimaru's words once again shocked Itachi, as he originally thought that Cthulhu was merely an illusion among cultists, but in Orochimaru's words, everything seemed to transform into a real existence. According to Orochimaru, the enormous, grotesque figure haunting his nightly dreams was no mere vision, but a true god. Itachi shook his head, denying it. Since you say the existence of the Great Old Ones has transcended our time and space, how do you know of their existence? How do you know all this isn't just your delusion? Orochimaru smiled slightly. Alright then, let me prove it to you. With that, he got up and walked into the darkness behind the operating table. He reached for a switch in a dark spot, and the lights on the stone wall immediately brightened, illuminating a series of liquid tanks placed in front of the stone wall. Standing in front of one of the tanks, he began to introduce the creature inside to Itachi. This creature is called the Elder Thing. They descended into our world from outer space a billion years ago. At that time, most of our world was still ocean, but they possessed a mature amphibious biological system, capable of adapting to life in the sky, sea, and land, and thus settled here. They had intelligence comparable to that of humans and established large cities and a mature social system in the world at that time. However, their cities and civilization have almost all been lost, because 300 million years ago, their race went to war with Cthulhu and his kin. The ultimate result was the extinction of the Elder Things. No one knows if any Elder Things still survive, but I can tell you that the ruins of their last city are located in the mountains of the northern ice plains in the land of snow. That's when it hit Itachi. The spindle-shaped creature before him stirred a memory. He had seen an Elder Thing before. About some years ago, a newspaper had published news about the discovery of an ultra-ancient civilization in the land of snow, which was very popular at the time. That newspaper had even published a blurry photo, where the spindle-shaped body and five-pointed star head could be vaguely seen. Before he could organize his thoughts, Orochimaru walked over again and said, "When I defected from Hidden Leaf Village, what I actually took with me wasn't the sealing book claimed by the third Hokage, but a statue of Cthulhu. That statue of Cthulhu possesses very magical abilities, allowing anyone who sees the statue to become immersed in a wonderful illusion and ultimately turning them into a faithful believer of Cthulhu." These words made Itachi's heart suddenly startle, as he suddenly thought of the things he had been dreaming of in recent days. Will I become a believer of Cthulhu too? Chapter 157, The Nameless City, The Demon Desert. Itachi? Itachi? Hearing Orochimaru's voice by his ear, he finally came to his senses. Did you think of something just now? Faced with Orochimaru's question, Itachi merely shook his head. It's nothing. Orochimaru gave him a meaningful glance and continued, and 3 years ago, Denzo conducted a large-scale search operation within the Land of Fire. As far as I know, he was also looking for a creature called Migo. The Migos were another highly intelligent extraterrestrial race. They arrived on this world millions of years ago and waged a brief war with the Elder Things. The outcome of this war was a stalemate between the two races, but it also accelerated the demise of the Elder Things. Itachi. Hidden Leaf Village has always known about the existence of Cthulhu and extraterrestrial races, but they have never made it public. They constantly talk about village, family, and comrades, yet they are unwilling to share this information and let the public know the truth. Hidden Leaf Village is just a village where hypocrites gather. But you are different from those people, Itachi. You chose to escape Hidden Leaf Village, just like me. Because you're a smart person who views these hypocritical words as burdens. As long as we join forces, we can reveal the hidden truths behind this world and find the unique door of truth in this universe. Join me. Itachi. Orochimaru's tone grew more fervent, the edges of his eyes gradually developing a frenzied bloodshot look, and his outstretched arms seemed to be waiting for Itachi to throw himself into his embrace. However, to Itachi, this version of Orochimaru was not much different from the fervent followers of Kojiro. It was just that he seemed slightly more rational and retained a human form, that was all. Regardless, he would never join Orochimaru, becoming a mad seeker of truth in pursuit of the so-called reality. He also knew that he hadn't completely abandoned his village, family, and comrades as Orochimaru claimed. Perhaps it was precisely because he believed in the village that he chose to sacrifice himself and his family. I refuse. What did you say? Orochimaru's expression was one of disbelief, as he had thought that once he saw Itachi's confused look, recruiting him would be a done deal. But Itachi gave him the wrong answer. This left him very disappointed, and his outstretched arms drooped down. You heard me, I don't want to repeat myself. Having said that, Itachi walked away. As he stood there, Orochimaru's expression shifted from disappointment to unwillingness. He slightly gritted his teeth, and a large snake slowly slithered down from his sleeve. At that moment, Itachi suddenly stopped, not turning back as he said, Orochimaru, did you know a dark-skinned humanoid entity among the Great Old Ones? This sudden question left Orochimaru momentarily stunned, a playful smile appearing on his lips again. I don't know, Itachi. Seeing that Orochimaru couldn't give a clear answer, Itachi no longer lingered and left directly. as he watched Itachi's departing figure. The large snake that was supposed to fly out of Orochimaru's sleeve slowly retracted. This has become interesting. A month later, at the Akatsuki's gathering, Pain calmly announced the news as usual. Orochimaru betrayed Akatsuki and ran away. Beside him, Sasori gritted his teeth and said angrily, "Humphrey, I knew that guy was unreliable, putting his personal matters before the organization." The personal matters that he referred to were, of course, Orochimaru's secret dealings with the other Sannin from Hidden Leaf Village 4 years ago. Although Pain had forgiven Orochimaru's actions at that time, Sasori still held a grudge. "While I don't want to let Orochimaru escape, Akatsuki's members are still too few." As Pain spoke, Zetsu immediately chimed in, Me. Let me join." But before Pain could respond, Sasori immediately barked, "Get out of the way." "Yes." Zetsu lowered his head and left. After scolding Zetsu, Sasori continued, "Leave Orochimaru to me. His subordinate Kabuto is just like a puppet in my hands. I'll quickly find his hiding place." His initiative was also due to his long-standing disdain for Orochimaru, but Pain temporarily shelved Sasori's proposal. "Don't rush, I already have leads on your partner. Let's talk after he joins. And regarding Itachi's companion, I'll find a way soon. That's all, you're dismissed." Retrieving the control signal, Nagato slowly sat up from the signal transmitter. "Nagato, is it really okay to let Orochimaru go like this?" Conan asked worriedly. Cough, cough. Seeing Nagato cough, Conan immediately stepped forward to pat his back. "Right now, Akatsuki doesn't have enough personnel to spare to search for him. That guy is very cunning. Even if there's an undercover as Sasori said, it won't be easy to find him in a short time. Moreover, the initial purpose of recruiting Orochimaru into Akatsuki was to gain his research capabilities. Now that we have obtained the merged modified cells of the Deep Ones and White Zetsu, Orochimaru's choice to leave the organization at this time shows that he knows his place. However, such a betrayal of the organization cannot be tolerated." Cough, cough. Having said a lot in one breath, Nagato started coughing again. Conan patiently patted Nagato's back while saying, "Nagato, your health. Don't worry. I will definitely not die before we achieve our ideals. I promise." In the vast, desolate desert, 2 tall camels were slowly carrying 2 figures draped in enormous cloaks. These figures, one in front and one behind, had their faces covered by thick collars, preventing sand from entering their respiratory systems and making it impossible for others to see their faces. In this desert, known as the Demon Desert by Hidden Sand Village, one could see sun-dried animal bones and dead plants everywhere. Death's breath filled this place, where few humans dared to tread. It was common to see the remnants of buildings left by the ancestors of the Land of Wind. But time and harsh conditions had turned this place into forbidden ground, a taboo zone where ordinary people could not venture. The level of restriction here was even higher than that of the Forest of Death in Hidden Leaf Village. There, death was swift and decisive. But in the Demon Desert, only loneliness and despair accompanied you. The sand and wind slowly drained life from even the strongest body, leaving only bones as warnings to future generations. But even in this deadly desert, something valuable remained hidden. The 2 travelers rode their camels, following ancient writings left by their predecessors in search of a mystery that had remained veiled for thousands of years. At last, their perseverance paid off. Before them lay their destination. The lead rider lowered his collar, a wicked smile playing on his lips. "I finally found you." The nameless city. Kagami, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them, coming out of his spider's eye vision as a brief signal came from a distant, desolate place. "Ah, someone has finally found it." A faint, satisfied smile appeared on his face. As for who had discovered that place, he could probably guess. The area was so remote that it was rarely visited by anyone. Other than by chance encounter, one could only find this place by following the guidance in the Necronomicon. The map, though devoid of place names, held secrets in its topography. Anyone who studied it closely enough would eventually determine its location. When Orochimaru finally arrived, he knew instantly that this was the city mentioned in the Necronomicon. From a distance, he saw the city across the yellow sands, like half a corpse clawing its way out of a crude tomb. Although many ruins were in the Demon Desert, he could tell at a glance that the age of these ruins far surpassed all the others. This city was ancient enough to be the great-great-grandfather of the other ruins. It may have existed when the nearby riverbed, now just a dry hollow, was still full of life. The city had once flourished but had been worn down by the passage of time and the relentless desert sands, leading to its inevitable decay. Yet, despite its decline, the secrets hidden within this place were worth exploring. Orochimaru and a traveler wearing glasses set up a simple shelter near the entrance to the nameless city to shield themselves from the scorching sun and fierce winds, taking a brief rest. "Orochimaru-sama, Do you think this city is truly cursed, as the legends say? The bespectacled traveler asked. Kabuto, sometimes human reason is a burden. When dealing with certain mysteries, you cannot maintain purely rational thinking. Otherwise, you'll never find the true answer. Or, your rigid rationality will shatter the moment you glimpse the truth. As the last rays of the setting sun cast their glow, Orochimaru opened the Necronomicon. Kabuto silently watched, eyes filled with curiosity and desire, as Orochimaru pored over the Book of Evil. Having served him for over 4 years, Kabuto had only learned of the Necronomicon's existence after Orochimaru betrayed Akatsuki a few days earlier. Orochimaru had warned him that if he wasn't prepared, he should never open the book. The mysterious knowledge and strange theories within could overwhelm the mind of an ordinary person in an instant. Thus, Kabuto had never touched the book, not even its cover. In fact, Orochimaru treated the Necronomicon as a treasure, never letting anyone else handle it. However, on occasion, he would read portions of the book aloud to Kabuto, satisfying his growing curiosity. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die. Orochimaru read with a deep breath. These words were written by Abdul al-Hazred after he dreamt of this place at night and then composed this verse. Confusing, isn't it? Well, it should be. After all, Abdul didn't even want to mark the exact location of this place in the main text. He was utterly mad, there's no doubt about that. But what could be hidden in a place that even a madman feared? How insignificant we are. As Orochimaru mused, lost in thought, Kabuto quietly stared at the Necronomicon. Judging by the gold lettering on the cover and the quality of the paper, it seemed like a modern product. Could the author actually be a contemporary person? But the author's name was oddly long and strange. Had Orochimaru been deceived by someone? Though Kabuto had his suspicions, he didn't dare voice them, because Orochimaru was already deeply captivated by the book. In the black desert night, they waited for hours until the stars began to fade. The sky turned grayish-white, then slowly transformed into a rosy glow edged with gold. They knew then that dawn had arrived. Orochimaru quickly packed up and left the resting spot, with Kabuto hurrying to follow. When they reached the entrance of the nameless city, Orochimaru's joy intensified. This joy manifested as a subtle tremor in his feet and shoulders as he sat atop his camel. Though the place was called a city, time and the relentless desert winds had eroded it until it resembled the size of the other ruins in the Demon Desert. Standing before the city, one couldn't easily glimpse the grandeur it once held. Riding his camel, Kabuto scanned the surroundings with the advantage of height. Yet, strangely, he found no inscriptions or carvings indicating who had built the city. Observing closely, he realized that the city was much larger than the ruins visible on the surface. Faint traces of buildings buried beneath the sand hinted at walls or foundations, structures preserved by the very sands that covered them. If he included the range of these foundations, Kabuto could imagine how vast this place must have once been. It could have been a civilization on par with Hidden Sand Village. And where they were standing might not even be the city's true entrance, but merely an archway. Riding back and forth on camels through the city, Orochimaru and Kabuto found nothing worth investigating except for the desolate ruins eroded by wind and sand. Except for one thing. A massive stone temple stood in the city center. As they approached the temple's dark, deep entrance, a cold wind suddenly blew out, making Kabuto shiver. His senses sharpened. Why was it so cold in this scorching desert? But before he could think further, Orochimaru had already urged his camel forward toward the temple. Let's go inside, Orochimaru said. Kabuto. Chapter 158, The Nameless City. Abdul al-Hazred. The entrance to the temple was very small. Orochimaru and Kabuto had to tie their camels to a stone pillar next to the temple, and then, holding torches, crouched down to enter. The temple was very deep, and although their vision was limited, the dark corridor seemed to extend infinitely. Kabuto also noticed that the corridors were sloping downward, indicating that the overall structure of the building wasn't the typical flat architecture seen in human constructions, but instead extended deep underground. Orochimaru led the way with the torch, while he followed cautiously behind him. As they moved further in, he realized the walls on either side of the corridor were bare. There were no sconces for lighting with oil. He wondered if visitors to the temple always needed torches, but kept the thought to himself. Orochimaru's slight smile suggested he had anticipated everything. He radiated confidence. They walked for what felt like hours through the narrow corridor. The low ceiling and pressing walls made Kabuto feel the weight bearing down on him. Something about these unnaturally tight dimensions didn't sit right. What kind of architect would design this? Is this some ruins of an ancient civilization? He thought. Or a temple buried by sandstorms? Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't a place for people to live. It felt more like a temple for some kind of ritual. Yet, this didn't explain the abnormally low ceilings. Fear of the unknown made Kabuto want to stop and retreat, but his obedience to Orochimaru pushed him forward. After some more time, he suddenly noticed the cramped space seemed to open up a little. He raised his hand and found the ceiling had indeed risen, allowing him to stand a bit straighter, although he still couldn't stand fully upright. Finally, some relief, he thought. But just as he was getting comfortable in this space, he realized Orochimaru had disappeared. "Orochimaru-sama?" He called out hesitantly, but there was only silence. Cold gust of wind blew through, extinguishing Kabuto's torch and leaving him standing in darkness. "Orochimaru-sama? Where are you?" he shouted. He heard a faint sound ahead. He quickly grabbed a kunai from his waist pouch and held it in front of him defensively. But no attack came. It was Orochimaru, his neck stretched out to reach him. "I'm just ahead. Follow me," he said, before swiftly retracting back. Kabuto wasn't frightened by this sight. In these narrow passages, Orochimaru often used his soft physique modification, a ninjutsu that allowed him to stretch and extend his body at will. How can I see? Something wasn't right. His torch had gone out, so how was he seeing Orochimaru? Where was this light coming from? The strangeness of the situation pushed him forward, hurrying to catch up with the snake Sannin. Finally, he reached Orochimaru, who was kneeling next to a wall, carefully inspecting a wooden box. He saw hundreds, perhaps even thousands, of similar boxes neatly arranged along the walls of the corridor. He hurried to Orochimaru's side and examined the box closely. Most of it was made from polished wood, but the front had a cool, smooth surface, similar to glass. Judging by its rectangular shape, he concluded that it must be a coffin. "This seems to be a coffin," Orochimaru said, confirming Kabuto's observation. "But what's inside?" Orochimaru's curiosity made Kabuto uneasy. Even someone as knowledgeable as Orochimaru didn't know what was hidden here. Kabuto's discomfort deepened as Orochimaru slowly opened the thick coffin lid. As the lid slid aside, the contents inside came into view. "What is that?" As a medical ninja, Kabuto immediately recognized that the body inside wasn't human. In fact, it didn't belong to any known species. "Calm down," Orochimaru's hand pressed firmly on Kabuto's shoulder. Kabuto took deep breaths, trying to regain his composure, as he glanced away from the coffin. His rationality returned slowly. "You're too bound by common sense," Orochimaru said calmly. "Maybe bringing you here was a mistake." Compared to Kabuto's overreaction, Orochimaru remained composed. He extended the torch into the coffin, illuminating more details of the contents. Inside was the dried-up corpse of an odd creature, dressed in luxurious fabrics and adorned with expensive jewelry and ornaments of gold and unknown shiny metals. Despite its mummified state, many details remained visible. The reptilian being had a crocodile-like body, though shorter than a human. Its feet were more delicate than those of most reptiles, with distinctly separated toes resembling human digits. A large forehead crowned with small protruding horns sat above its crocodile-like jaw. The remaining space in the coffin overflowed with gold, jewels, and ornate treasures, lending the scene an air of ancient opulence. Orochimaru was now convinced that this was a highly civilized, ancient reptilian species. Although the scene should have been bizarre, he couldn't shake a strange sense of familiarity. A reptile dressed in luxurious clothing and adorned with expensive accessories. Didn't it resemble some snake from Ruchi Cave? The cave, along with Mount Myabaku and the Shikatsu Forest, was known as one of the legendary places, a place many ninjas dreamed of reaching. The Ruchi Cave represented snakes, Mount Myabaku represented toads, and the Shikatsu Forest represented slugs. In their youth, the three legendary Sannin had gone their separate ways in search of these legendary places, where they had signed contracts with the summoned beasts and learned the sage mode. Orochimaru, of course, had found the Ruchi Cave. To learn the powerful sage mode, one had to first pass 3 trials. These 3 trials were set by the 3 leaders of the Ruchi Cave, and if one failed, the leaders had the option to devour the failed challenger. These 3 leaders of the cave were the Snake Princesses. When they fully revealed their human forms, they appeared as 3 beautiful young women. However, when enraged, parts of their faces and bodies transformed into serpentine features. Ultimately, Orochimaru had passed the trials of these 3 Snake Princesses and stood before the White Snake Sage. But the sage had one final request for Orochimaru. If he agreed, the sage would teach him sage mode. Orochimaru had refused and turned away. Because of this, the White Snake Sage had called Orochimaru an ignorant brat. To compensate for his failure to learn sage mode, he had later developed the Heaven's Curse mark. Now, seeing the corpse inside the coffin reminded him of the Snake Princesses from the Ruchi Cave, adorned with fine textiles and precious metals. Their half-snake, half-human form when angry had looked almost identical to the reptilian figure lying in this coffin. So the Ruchi Cave wasn't the oldest legendary place after all. Could this city be the true origin? Based on what I'm seeing, this place must be over 1,000 years old. even older than the Richie Cave. Perhaps the ancestors of the Richie Cave originally called this city their home. At this moment, the ancestor of the snakes in Orochimaru's mind was no longer the white snake sage of the Richie Cave, who had only existed for about 1,000 years. In the records of the Necronomicon, the nameless city seen in Abdul al-Hazred's dream had an ancient history stretching back to eternity. Which was more significant was obvious at a glance. Orochimaru-sama? Kabuto's voice brought him back from his thoughts, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. Unexpectedly, he had discovered the truth of the Richie Cave here, a truth even the white snake sage might not have known. Kabuto, open the other coffins and check. Under Orochimaru's orders, he opened 2 more coffins. Inside, just like the first one, were elaborately decorated half-snake, half-human mummified corpses. This almost confirmed that this city had been an ancient civilization built by these half-snake people. And these people might very well have been the ancestors of the snakes from the Richie Cave. After passing through the passage lined with coffins, they entered a slightly more spacious room. While still cramped overhead, the room offered more space to move. There they discovered murals depicting the ancient civilization. From these coherent paintings, Orochimaru read some of the city's history. The city was originally coastal, built by the strange reptilian creatures now lying in the coffins. The buildings and gardens showcased their unique architectural style. As the waters withdrew, the desert swallowed the fertile valley that once sustained them. Still, they had relied on their wisdom to survive on the increasingly arid land. They had dug downward into the rock in a peculiar way, not only creating more living space but also following their prophet's guidance in trying to excavate a tunnel to an underground world suitable for their race to thrive. But one day, their race had been consumed by feelings of hatred and enmity. In the final painting, the city's builders had destroyed the city they had once created. The city they had built with their own hands, they ultimately destroyed with those same hands. Orochimaru and Kabuto stood in silence before the historical scroll, their minds deeply shaken by the stunning revelations. So the Demon Desert had not always been a lifeless wasteland but had once been a coastal area. And from that time, a high civilization no less advanced than human civilization had already existed here. What an astonishing discovery! Even the oldest historical records of the Land of Gods likely couldn't have contained this strange chapter of history. Compared to Kabuto, Orochimaru's emotional reaction was slightly more restrained. This was because, from the Necronomicon, he had already learned some of the world's historical changes. Billions of years ago, when the Elder Things had arrived, most of the world had still been covered by oceans. So when this city had been built, the desert had still been a coastline, which wasn't particularly surprising. This revealed the city's history didn't stretch back as far as the Elder Things. Compared to their ancient civilization, this city was merely a newcomer. Orochimaru sensed how the world's ancient history had been woven together with shocking precision. Each discovery only deepened his appreciation of history's intricate design. As they contemplated these historical revelations, a gust of wind rattled through the chamber, forcing open a small door in the corner. The sound of metal hinges screeched from the door, and a beam of intense light shot through the door. Before the powerful light, Orochimaru and Kabuto instinctively raised their hands to shield their eyes. But as a seeker of truth, Orochimaru wasn't afraid of the blinding light and boldly walked toward the door. Orochimaru-sama! Kabuto called out from behind, trying to stop him. But at this moment, Orochimaru's gaze was filled with fanaticism. Neither Kabuto's calls nor the fierce wind from beyond the door full of light could halt his steps. What was that? What is behind the door? Let me see. Orochimaru's insatiable thirst for knowledge pushed him forward, despite the unknown dangers that might lie ahead. Through the gaps between his fingers, he peered beyond the threshold. A vast expanse of radiant land stretched before him, uniform white light emanating from the ground. A thin, luminescent mist hovered above. In that strange space, the doorway that connected to the chamber wasn't another simple entrance like the one he stood before, but rather a solemn brass door that emanated a tarnished glow. From the luminous mist emerged a human figure, walking slowly toward the brass door. Orochimaru was so shocked that he couldn't utter a word, standing frozen as if bound, his eyes fixed on the approaching form. The figure reached the brass door, mounted the steps, and stood just beyond the threshold. The moment the figure fully appeared, the light inside became less intense, and the strange wind vanished. Orochimaru and Kabuto studied the figure that couldn't yet be seen clearly. "Who are you?" Orochimaru asked slowly. The figure answered in a calm, mature voice. "My name is Abdul al-Hazred." Chapter 159, The Nameless City, Learning Abdullah, the author of the Necronomicon. While it had been unclear exactly when he had lived, it had been certain that someone with such a bizarre name couldn't possibly have belonged to the current era. So, when Orochimaru and Kabuto heard the person before them introduce himself, their shock reached its peak in an instant. eyes wide with astonishment as they tried to see through everything about the man in front of them. Who would have thought that just moments after Orochimaru had been reading the Necronomicon, he would encounter the author in person? You're Abdullah? The author of the Necronomicon? Orochimaru asked. Yes, why? Do I not look like him? The man at the doorway took another step forward, and the white glow surrounding him dimmed a bit, allowing Orochimaru and Kabuto to finally see his face clearly. He was an elderly man dressed in a white robe, his head wrapped in a white turban with a distinct ethnic flair. His face was deeply lined like withered bark, and his long white goatee reached down to his chest. This image of an old man wasn't particularly unusual, but standing at the threshold of the space's light, Orochimaru felt as if this man was more of a sage than the white snake sage. With that in mind, Orochimaru blurted out, "Are you still human?" Haha. The old man chuckled lightly, then responded, "In essence, I'm not so different from you. But in my current state, I suppose I'm no longer human in the conventional sense." This cryptic reply, much like the mysterious verses in the Necronomicon, had been difficult to understand. It had been very much in the style of Abdullah and his mad poetry. But Orochimaru wasn't so quick to confirm the identity of the man standing before him. This name, unrecorded in history, had only ever been seen on the title page of the Necronomicon. "Can you introduce yourself again?" Orochimaru asked cautiously. "Abdullah al-Hazred?" The old man smiled. "But first, let me correct you on one thing. Abdullah is not my real name. I've long since forgotten my true name, so calling me that is fine." Another enigmatic answer, which caused Orochimaru to show a trace of dissatisfaction on his face. The old man, however, paid no mind and began to recount his life story. "I am an Arab. My father, Abdullah, was a renowned historian and archaeologist among my people. My childhood was carefree, and for a time, I believed I would live a happy and ordinary life. That was until my coming-of-age ceremony, when my father revealed to me the true mission of the Al-Hazred family. Our role, he said, was to be chroniclers of history, recording the hidden events of the world that were unknown to humankind and passing them down through generations. After my father passed away, I inherited the name of Abdullah and became the chronicler of history, the author of the Necronomicon. Abdullah in Arabic means servant of the great Lord. To this day, I still don't know who we are serving or for whom we are recording history. So, now you understand, Abdullah was never just one person. It's the title given to the chroniclers of the Al-Hazred family. The Necronomicon was not written by me alone, but by many generations, perhaps dozens, of Abdullahs." The old man spoke with a calm tone, but his words had already left Orochimaru utterly astonished. The book he had always trusted, hadn't been written by a single individual, but by multiple generations of chroniclers bearing the name Abdullah al-Hazred. This revelation was something he could never have imagined. Even Kabuto, standing behind Orochimaru, was shocked. Although his understanding of the Necronomicon hadn't been as deep as Orochimaru's, he had been able to tell from Orochimaru's intense absorption every time he had read the book that it had been no ordinary text. But to think that such a remarkable book hadn't been written by just one person. Haha, why is that so shocking? I'm nothing like the great Mage Iban, who had enough life force and power to explore the unnamable. I am just an ordinary mortal, doing what I can to slowly uncover and record the truth of history through the efforts of generations. The mention of Iban again stunned Orochimaru, who had been this Iban. Noticing his bewildered look, Abdullah smiled faintly. Iban, ah. He had been a chronicler from a time even more distant than mine, and he had authored a book called the Book of Iban. Unlike me, he was a great mage from the city of Cthulhu, with powerful magic and longevity, allowing him to explore places unreachable by mortals. The Book of Iban documents entities such as the toad god Tsathoggua, serpent people and the spider god Itlaknaka. To my knowledge, the earliest version of the Book of Iban was written on animal hides in the prehistorical era, in the Sumerian language. However, even in my time, that version was already lost. You stand no chance of finding it now. If you seek his knowledge, you might have better luck finding Iban himself. Some say he fled to Saturn under the guidance of Tsathoggua, escaping persecution from rival mages. Others say his soul still wanders between Earth and the Dreamlands. As the old man mentioned the great Mage Iban, even his face showed a trace of admiration. But what puzzled Orochimaru more was the barrage of unfamiliar terms the old man had mentioned. What is Earth? Arabia. What is the city of Cthulhu? What is Saturn? What is the Dreamlands? These strange words, which should have been simple to understand, had become incomprehensible in their context. Orochimaru immediately voiced his confusion, and the old man pondered for a moment before responding solemnly. What I'm about to say, do not be afraid. The things I just described happened in my era, but your era is after mine. If we compare my time to the first era, then your time is the second era. We are having a cross-epoch conversation. In a tatami room, Orochimaru stood solemnly before a blank wall, speaking these words with utmost seriousness. The first era? The second era? Even before coming here, he had already concluded that not everything in this world could be measured by common sense. When dealing with these extraordinary matters, if one tried to apply absolute rational thinking, the outcome would definitely not be good. Therefore, compared to Kabuto, his reaction just now wasn't particularly intense, because from the very beginning, he was mentally prepared to accept anything. But when he heard the words from Abdullah, even Orochimaru, who rarely thought along normal lines, couldn't maintain absolute calm. Because this was no longer just some trivial truth, but the real origin of this world. You mean you and I are not merely from different times? Or are you saying you and I aren't even from the same world? If we're not from the same era, how many years apart are we? And if we're not from the same world, where is your world? Tell me. Tell me everything. At this moment, Orochimaru was like a mad seeker of truth, greedily asking the old man standing on the steps before him. The old man didn't hesitate and began to answer his questions. Strictly speaking, you and I are neither from the same time nor the same world. But you and I do share one identity, and that is being Earthlings. Earth. Orochimaru repeated the unfamiliar word, his mind fully occupied, pondering the meaning of the term. While it may appear flat to us, our world is not a two-dimensional plane, but a three-dimensional sphere. This three-dimensional sphere is called Earth, and in the universe, every world is essentially a large sphere. Before the old man could continue, Kabuto, who stood behind Orochimaru, interjected with a question. Wait. You say this world is a sphere, but why don't I feel the curvature of the ground when I walk on it? To Kabuto's question, the old man chuckled lightly and explained, in the ancient times of my world, people had the same thoughts as you. But you must understand, this world isn't just the size of a ball, and it is vastly larger than a courtyard or a village. The earth is far bigger than you can imagine, and human beings are too small to perceive its curvature. But if you often observe the harbor, you'll notice that as ships approach from afar, the sails are always visible before the hull. Kabuto's face showed shock upon hearing this explanation. As a frequent spy operating near harbors, he had long observed the phenomenon the old man described, but he had never seriously considered its cause. Now, after the old man's explanation, it seemed to make perfect sense. There was no other plausible explanation. Compared to Kabuto's surprise, Orochimaru wasn't too startled after hearing the old man's words. Because in his previous research, he had vaguely suspected that the world was not a flat plane. Now, after the old man's introduction, he was certain that this world was like Earth. After a moment of thought, he asked, So, you're saying you're from a place on Earth? Yes, you're sharp. The old man praised Orochimaru. In fact, not all the land on Earth is connected in one piece. We call large areas of land continents, and smaller areas islands. Orochimaru nodded thoughtfully but quickly grew suspicious again. How do you know about our world? Without any change in his expression, the old man replied directly, As I mentioned earlier, I am not a living human in the traditional sense. Ever since I found myself in this world, though I'm not sure how I got here, I can observe everything happening here. Not only do I know that your world is a world of ninjas, but I also know your name is Orochimaru, and that you are a follower of Yog-Sothoth. Interestingly, my beliefs are in Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, which are very close to yours. Orochimaru nodded, tentatively accepting the old man's explanation. If he didn't believe it, this wild author meets reader scenario couldn't be explained otherwise. So, he continued asking, What is your world like? In the first era, the connection between our world and yours was not yet severed. Our cultures were interconnected. At that time, humans couldn't use supernatural powers, but they could wield the power of technology. The power of technology? Orochimaru questioned. Although he believed in the power of technology, he ultimately saw technology as something that could enhance ninjutsu. Without ninjutsu, what could technology really do? Technology can accomplish far more than you can imagine. For example, when you ninjas throw kunai, at most you can hold 8 kunai in both hands at one time. The accuracy depends on the individual, and after throwing, you need to pick up the kunai again. The frequency and amount of kunai you can carry are limited. But in our world, for long-range attacks, we don't use throwing weapons. We use a weapon called a gun. With just a pull of the trigger, a gun can fire projectiles with similar power to kunai at a rate of 12 to 15 shots per second. Not only is the reload speed and ammunition capacity far superior to kunai, but the learning curve is also lower. A child could easily use a gun to kill a group of adults. For larger-scale weapons, our world has something called missiles. These weapons have incredibly long range. Your ninjutsu requires you to see the target to cast, but missiles do not. The longest-range missiles can even be launched from one country to another, capable of wiping out an area as large as your Hidden Leaf village in an instant. We also have a weapon called a nuclear bomb, the most powerful weapon in our world. A nuclear bomb's delivery system is similar to a missile, but its blast radius is typically several kilometers, and the temperature at the explosion center can reach millions of degrees Celsius. However, the greatest threat of a nuclear bomb isn't just its immediate explosive power, but the nuclear radiation that remains afterward, making an area unsafe for years or decades. Due to their overwhelming power, nuclear weapons are strictly controlled in our world to prevent the collapse of civilization. Thus, nuclear bombs are rarely used. So, in the First Era, the ninja world experienced something akin to a nuclear bomb attack, transforming its biomes and mutating its living organisms. The old man continued speaking without hesitation or pause, as though these incomprehensible truths were simple facts. If all of this was mere imagination, it would be impossible to speak so fluently. A gun a child could use to kill adults. Missiles that could destroy Hidden Leaf village. A nuclear bomb capable of releasing millions of degrees of heat and affecting an area for many years? Was this power really something humans could control? After hearing the old man's explanation, he suddenly felt that ordinary people without chakra might possess unimaginable potential. Given enough time, could the common people of this world research such technology and eventually replace ninjas? And most importantly, why did the ninja world suffer something similar to a nuclear bomb attack? Chapter 160, The Nameless City, Serpent People. The old man's words, powerful enough to shock the entire ninja world, stirred even Orochimaru's heart. Faced with the unknown world, he felt a hint of yearning, for only by seeing it for himself could he truly understand what guns, missiles, and nuclear weapons really were. However, the old man's next words quickly dispelled these thoughts. What I just mentioned happened during the First Era, but the Earth has already entered the Second Era. Those weapons, such as guns and missiles, have become relics of history. Even if you go to the other side, you won't find the weapons I described. The conflicts between nations and the wars between peoples severely hindered the development of continental civilization, making that part of the world very backward. They have been trapped in prolonged civil wars, so for thousands of years, they haven't bothered coming to this side, despite the weakening barriers between the worlds. Because they are too busy with their own struggles. At this point, Kabuto, who had been quietly listening for a long time, posed a question. You mentioned the First and Second Eras earlier. How exactly are these eras divided? He lightly stroked his goatee. That's a good question. The division between the First and Second Eras on Earth is based on a significant event. My guess is that this event is likely tied to the proper alignment of the stars. When the stars align correctly, Earth undergoes a great cleansing of civilizations, wiping away the previous era and giving birth to a new one. And in my research, I've found that before the First Era, there might have been a Zero Era. The Ebon I mentioned earlier likely belonged to the Zero Era, where magic was the dominant force on Earth. During that time, the Earth still had continents like Hyperborea and Atlantis. So, the alternation of civilizations goes like this. The Zero Era was centered on magic, the First Era focused on technology, and the Second Era might be about the ninjutsu you ninjas wield? But that's not certain either, because ninjutsu and chakra weren't created by ninjas. The old man abruptly stopped speaking, leaving Orochimaru and Kabuto in deep contemplation. You said earlier that these were just your guesses. So, you're not certain about the transitions between the eras? Orochimaru asked again. The old man nodded. Of course. I'm not the all-knowing Yog-Sothoth. My ability to observe this world from another is limited. Orochimaru understood that the other world the old man mentioned was an unknown realm or really another world, one unreachable by mortals. As he thought this, he quietly glanced at the glowing space behind the brass door. To him, it was a mysterious unknown. Although it's speculation, you can still find evidence that the First Era once existed. For example, do you know who invented some of the common technological innovations in your ninja world? Who invented paper? Who invented glass? Who invented electricity? Who invented plastic? These are all great inventions that transformed human life, yet no one remembers their inventors. Isn't that strange? Your world focuses on developing ninjutsu, neglecting basic technological advancements, yet you enjoy the conveniences these technologies bring. Don't you ever reflect on that? Because these technologies are remnants of Earth's First Era. You've simply inherited the technological legacy of the previous civilization. Although the great cleansing of the last age wiped out most of human civilization, a small part survived. And according to my calculations, there isn't much time left before the stars align for the third time. There are only two ways to escape this disaster. One is to find the passageway that the serpent people's prophet once showed them, just like I did, and enter the world beyond it. This would allow you to live forever like me, but you'd lose all other forms of power. The second way is to face the great cleansing head-on, and whether or not you survive will depend on your fate. Alright, my time is running out. Do you have any final questions? The old man's ultimatum startled Orochimaru a bit. He had many more things he wanted to ask, but the old man's urgency made him unsure of what to ask. What about this nameless city and the serpent people you mentioned? The old man smiled and raised his head slightly, saying, the serpent people evolved from Earth's earliest reptiles, around 275 million years ago. At their birth, they worshipped the father of all serpents, the great old one, Yig. Later, some of the serpent people established a subterranean world called Yoth, where they worshipped Tsuthoghua, abandoning Yig. As a result, the fickle and temperamental Yig cursed them, causing some of the serpent people to devolve into serpentine savages. These savages lost most of their intelligence, became violent, and turned on each other. The city you are in was destroyed by them. However, some of the serpent people were protected by Tsuthoghua and